Hey guys, how we doing? I know Tyler's raring to go. Joe's ready to go. Who we got here? Let's see. We're all coming in. I've got a guest waiting in the wings, and we certainly have a lot to talk about. About yesterday was quite a day, and so I think we'll have plenty of content tonight for sure. We still looks like we've only got a couple. I'm not going to keep. You know what? If you snooze, you lose. If they're not here on time, that's fine. I'm sure we'll have people later. But since I've got a couple, my guest tonight, as you may have guessed, hi Joe, um, and hi Tyler. You might have guessed from the thumbnail I put out there that I have a gentleman who I've come to get to know through a mutual love of horse racing and handicapping, and he's the best tour guide of Keeneland there is. And a lot of you guys know him from Trust the Profits, Riders Up Tim. Tim Hughes is here with us, and what we're going to do is he would prefer it if we had this is question driven. Hi, Sean, how you doing? So he's going to give a little bit of perspective, and there's a few things to talk about, especially from yesterday, that he just enlightened me with a really great concept. He's a hard boot Kentucky guy. He learned from the track, very different than me. I learned through books. He learned from the track. So you're definitely going to get a wealth of knowledge this evening. So without further ado, I am going to bring on Mr. Tim Hughes. Hey, Tim, how are you?
I'm doing great, Alex. Thanks for that wonderful introduction. Born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky, grew up around Keeneland, and then, spent a few years traveling around the world in the Air Force, but settled back in here in the Louisville area. So, Churchill in my backyard, but love the Kentucky circuit. That's my primary focus, but horse racing in general. Grew up around horse farms in Lexington, had an uncle that worked on one, and, spent a lot of time around the industry. So absolutely love the game.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, everything you said about Keeneland is absolutely true. And this is a guy I've been a Saratoga guy for a long time, and I just was absolutely blown away. Remember I told you, I go, that's what a track is supposed to be. Yeah. That it seems like somebody really took the time to design a track properly. They didn't just throw an oval together and build around it. Somebody had a good vision. And if you guys said it before, you guys, if you haven't been to Keeneland, you owe it to yourself. It's just fantastic. But anyway, I'm going to yield the floor. And what we're going to do is, as I said, this is going to be a true Q&A. Tim would like us to ask questions. I'm sure you guys have plenty. But I'll just start off by just asking a really rudimentary, a general thing. The first one of these we did after the Belmont, I just gave a real basic run through on how I handicap a race and some certain things to think about, like, just remembering that if you always remember, they run horse races to sell the horses and determine their value. If you remember that, handicapping makes a lot more sense than just wins and losses. You figure out trainer intent and why they're there. But anyway, I'll just ask you now. You got started early on and learned at the track, which is very different than the way I did. I did a lot of reading, and before I forayed into it. But how do you approach? Let's just say a race card. I guess we could start with that, or maybe an individual race. However you'd like to proceed, but. Everybody has a different way of going about it. I told these guys, to me, every horse tells a story. So I try to think about their little story and how it fits into everything else. But anyway, if you could expound or go right ahead, and then I'm sure questions will emanate from there.
Yeah, sure. Look, I'll just go through my process with you. The way I approach a race is I'm a daily racing form guy, and not that I don't use the other products. I like Brisnet. I like the other products. It's just that this is the one that I've always used. So I just kind of stick with the known, and rather than, but I'll use the others. It's not.
I never knew that. All the time we've talked, I didn't know what source you used.
Exactly.
So I was like, all right, if he's a racing form guy, that's perfect because I got a lot
So
of DRS.
I use I use their formulators, which basically gives you the ability to go in instead of just a classic PP look to where you can just see the races. You can drill down on it. You can basically dice it and slice it any way you want. You can put queries in. You can have it show you any kind of stats for any kind of trainer for just this track, for just this distance, for whatever you want. But I think as with most handicappers, I just go in and I've got my own numbers and formula that I go through. And the first thing that I look at is, form and figures. And I go through and I basically have a rating for that. And then I'm looking at fit for the class level, right? So I'm looking at wherever horse has been and how he fits to this class. And when you look at class, I think there's an important thing to look at, and that's improving and declining horses. Because when you're looking at class is not just a black and white, you're at this level or you're not. A lot of time horses are on the improve and they're stepping up. And I would rather have a horse stepping up in class that's improving than a horse that's dropping down in class that's been finishing 9th of 9 every race and beaten by 20, 30 lengths every race. So
100%.
You've got to look at improving and declining horses.
Absolutely right. I mean, that is, when I first did it, a couple people asked about claiming races and, what's the key to it? I said, there it is. It's class. It's, if they're stepping up or they're dropping. And what's one of our favorite angles of all time is a horse who's, say, running for a 50,000 claimer, all of a sudden goes into a 10,000. Do I bet him? No. I bet against him as hard as I can because that's a monster drop. So,
right.
Just look. But
you said it a minute ago. There's a reason every horse runs in every race, and dropping down. And sometimes dropping down, you have to ask yourself, it's the trainer. If you've got one of the big trainers and he's dropping into a low level claimer, horse for sale. Okay, it's a horse for sale. If you've got a trainer that runs consistently at that level and he just had a horse that was running at a different level, maybe he's just trying to find the right level, and that horse is one you got to consider. So all factors that you got to look at. But one thing I failed to mention go ahead.
I was going to say that's a big angle for me, Tim. I told these guys at Churchill, the Churchill Fall meet is like the fire sale meet, because when I see Todd Pletcher, I bet against every one of them because they're there because he can't quite get them. They need work, or he's trying to unload them. So I see like at the fall meet, unless it's a stakes race, of course, but particularly claimers, Asmussen's a little different because he plays the claiming game.
Right.
But,
he does.
You see Bill Mott put a horse up for a tag, or Brad Cox, any of those guys, their barn is geared for stakes winners.
Yeah,
it's not geared.
You're not going to see Baffert in any $5,000 claimers.
No. Well, maybe Brant will be in one soon because that horse can't run. I threw him right out today.
All right, so back to my process. One thing that's really important that I think that you need to understand is that one thing that I love about the formulators in daily racing form is that you can go in and you can customize your view, okay, and you can turn things on and off that's in there. The one thing that's my default view when I pull up a card is there's no odds on the card. Yeah. I think that's really important for a handicapper. Yep. Okay, because you should be setting your own odds. You should be setting your own fair odds for every horse in every race before you go and wager, because you can't find value, and that's what everything is about. And we'll talk about that. But basically, I turn the odds off and I handicap the card just the way I was talking about. And then the last thing that I look at is pace and trip. Okay. And this is where I spend the most time, because pace and trip, you're looking at the race shape of where, the horse, where they prefer to be in a given race, what their running style is. But then when I look at trip and pace and trip, I'm trying to find the horse that's the value based on his running lines, and his PPs don't show how he's been running because he got left at the gate last time. He went 6 wide and got pushed or a lot wider than he wanted to be around 2 of 3 turns or whatever it is, and it's just, you have to find your angles. And that's a big one to me. I'm always trying to find the thing in the PPs that your basic better is not going to see, because not a lot of people will spend the time to go back and watch races.
Yeah,
That's where I spend most of my time is watching races.
that's exactly right. And I will be the first to admit that when a lower level of a race, that sometimes I won't watch nearly as much because, frankly, a lot of times in a claiming race, you can tell. I don't need to see it. I can tell. There's, but yeah, no. I would ask you a question, and I don't know if anybody would. Daily race formula the formula is a beautiful thing in that you can keep notes, and they
Yes,
follow you from one race to another.
absolutely.
How how far will you follow a horse? If you know what I mean. I mean, how like will? In other words, have you ever had a horse where the first time you looked at the PPs and you go, all right, I think he needs another start. And then you see the next start and you maybe don't necessarily see obvious improvement. Do you know what I mean? You wait to strike. In other words, like when everybody's going to give up on him and that's the time to pounce.
Yeah, I can give you an example for yesterday.
Excellent.
Race number 4. It was basically, what was the condition of this race? It was an optional climber.
Right.
Optional climber, not winner of one other than. Okay. And there was a horse in here by the name of, I think you may have heard of him, Blackout Time.
I had him. Yeah.
Exactly. And here's a horse for Kenny McPeak, getting the hottest rider in the country and Jose Ortiz on his back at Churchill, who did win 4 races yesterday. And this is a horse that Kenny thought very highly of.
Yeah.
Very highly of. And, he basically, after winning that maiden special weight early on, he had a second in the Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland. Then he went to Oakland to where he was, 4th in the Rebel. And then he just had a really horrible performance in the Arkansas Derby. And basically he pulled up a little bit in that race and they just put him on the shelf. So he comes back 2 months later in this spot. He's been working pretty well for you. You got to know how, that's another thing. When you're looking at works is knowing how trainers work and their styles. You're never going to see bullet after bullet in the things you see for a Bob Baffert from a Kenny McPeak. But this horse for a Kenny McPeak line in the works, this horse, and he looked great on the track. And to me, I just thought that this is a horse. I wanted a better price, but I looked at this particular race and I'm looking at the price on these horses and Final Story and IRAD, underlay of the century. IRAD rode like crap yesterday, which he typically does if he's not in the mood. And so he's taking all the money. And then there was Brave Pilot with Johnny V on. I didn't like that horse at all. And he finished, next to last in the race. And he was a second favorite. So I thought Blackout Time, even though his price was a little under what I thought it would be, I thought 4-1 was fair and pretty close to what he should get. He was a little bit under that, but he was still third favorite. And, he paid decently in there. So you got back $11 win place for a $4 wager. So
I'm going to give you the exact antithesis of what your analysis makes a lot more sense than mine does. And I'll tell you this because I can't figure out Kenny McPeak. We've talked about this. I cannot figure that man out. He's a nice guy. He's a nice trainer. You can't argue with his record. Right. But here's what I said. He's in here for a reason. This is a big stakes day, and he's a hardwood Kentucky guy. And I said, if he doesn't look right to me, he's probably going to run a big one because just the reverse logic I use because it's Kenny McPeak. Because I'm never right with him. So I said, all right, well, if I discounted him initially when I handicapped it, now looking back, look at the way the track is and everything else, I said, you know what? I got a feeling because – and the other thing is you make a really good point. You had 2 short prices in that race. And whenever these guys know, whenever I see that, I'm trying to find a price horse immediately because when they're both short, that means most of the time the betting public can't make up their mind. So usually a long shot comes in or an overlay. And Brave Pilot, I will say I liked his last race a lot. I thought he was really good in fighting off Strike or whatever, who bombed out earlier on the card. I think it was in race 2. And the other horse who was the co-favorite, the one you mentioned, Final whatever. I didn't like him either.
Final Story.
Fine. Yeah, I didn't like him either. I wasn't sold
No.
on either of them. So that was an audible on race day that I looked and said, Brave Tide, I don't think so. I thought I liked him at first because I watched his last race and I really liked it. But then I thought, you know what? He's probably going to regress a little bit. Perfect time for Kenny McPeak to throw a horse in like that. That's what he does. He's an under the radar guy. That's when he kills you. So yeah, I had to, but your logic is that's why you're a good handicapper, because that was really that's really solid analysis for sure. Let me give you a question that we got from Joe Mannix, and you're old enough. You're in the Rolling 60s club with me. You're probably old enough to remember Mannix, the show. So Joe asks a question for Tim. What is your favorite type of race to bet?
My favorite or my best? Because they're probably, I love the big races and everything because
Sure.
you get the best horses, and I think you get everyone's best effort. And to me, that's why those races are the easiest sometimes to handicap, or at least from my perspective. I think because you get an honest effort because everybody truly wants to win. That doesn't mean it's the easiest to get the winning horse. That's not what I mean. But actually, I would say my favorite type of race to bet, believe it or not, is maiden special weights. I do really well in maiden special weight races. And the first rate yesterday, as the 2-year-old babies, I crushed that 4, and he paid 860 to win, 526 to place. I've been playing win place, and got a really good payout on him.
And who trained him?
To start off the card yesterday at Churchill.
And Kenny McPeak trained him. And I saw that horse in the PPs. There were a lot of scratches. We have to.
Oh, yeah, tons.
But, however, I did see him, and he did catch my eye. And I was just thinking maybe if it's a full field and, all things being equal, it might be a little much because Kenny's not the greatest with first timers. But I did see, and apparently he's got some good 2-year-olds this year. But yeah. Well, that's you are definitely a better maiden guy than I am. I'm pretty good, but maidens to me, the one thing I've always, and maybe you'll agree or disagree with this. What I say to these guys about maidens is, particularly the big 2-year-old races, a lot of times we handicap them like it's the Kentucky Derby and not a 6-furlong sprint race.
Yeah.
So like Arminius yesterday. Okay, now that's a horse I looked at and didn't touch, but I told my people, I said, keep an eye on this one because he's a Derby. He could be a Derby horse. He's curling on the top.
He's gonna want to stretch out.
Oh yeah, he's gonna want. And I said he's gonna need time, but he's one you want to keep an eye on
for sure.
But a lot of people gravitate to those horses because they see those 2-turn pedigrees, and they go, oh, he can't. It's a sprint race.
Yeah,
he may need more ground. You go, a Vacoma. He's got that greasy miler speed, and he's great with first-time starters. I mean, that's a horse I'd rather more gravitate to. But a lot of people miss that. They just see those glorious pedigrees, and they think, oh, hey, I'll take the sprinter in those races all day long.
Yeah. And to Joe's question, one more, and Alex knows this based on some of our racing things that we've done together and being follow and trust the prophet sometimes. I love non-winners of 2 lifetime races.
Oh yes, and I still use that angle to this day. These guys, I mentioned you in a couple of my posts, and I'll let you expound on it. But it is an excellent angle, and it does work, and I have used it. So please,
yeah. So non-winners of 2 lifetime, you got to remember every horse in the race has one thing in common: they've all won one race. So what I love to do in those races is handicap the race that they all won. So when you look at everything like class and distance and all of the things, who's won at today's distance, who's won at today's, on today's surface, who's won at, at today's pace based on what the race shape is going to be with the other horses that he's in. He was on the lead, but now he's in a race with 4 other horses that want to be on the lead or whatever it is, whatever the case. But I love handicapping to where you can almost look at that one race for everything. Obviously, you have to take everything else into consideration, but I love looking at that one race and comparing it across the board because like everybody's won one race. And now for many of them, they may have had 10, 15, even 20 races sometimes since that one race. That's a lot. And then you have horses who maybe they've just come out of the maiden ranks and are facing winners for the first or second time. A lot of times those might be the better wager, but again, it's looking at the class and looking at that one race. But I love that angle. It's something that I do, and picked up at Keeneland, hearing it from one of the handicappers up there, and just love listening to some of the race evaluations up there on track at Keeneland.
Yeah, I mean, it was just a terrific angle, and to be honest, I'd never thought of it that way. But every time I go through a non-winners of 2 lifetime, did they win a maiden special weight? Is that how they broke the maiden? If they did, I take them seriously. If they're up for a tag, they get downgraded. Sometimes they still win, but there has to be other things involved. But again, that's where we get into, they all tell a story. You start from that first race and work your way up. And if once upon a time, a horse ran in the maiden special weight, and he bombed out, but in his second start showed a little improvement, and so on and so forth. And it's I think so many people just think about the last race, and you do get a feel for horses after a while, particularly at the stakes level. You know what they're going to do, and the form is more defined than it is at the claiming level. I mean, they're all hurt at the claim. They're all running hurt. They got to run every 2 weeks to pay their bills. And you're hardly in the East Coast. You never see workouts. In the West Coast, they work them every week because they have to. But they all tell a little story there, and I think that's why we like stakes races, because the form is so defined.
Right, it is.
And I mean, some people, I like a puzzle. Sometimes I mean, a good claiming race where you can find an overlay is usually pretty good. I mean, especially these guys know. I mean, I talk about Turfway many times and trust the prophets. If you're right 5 times normally at a regular track, if you're right once at Keeneland or Turfway, it may pay more than those 5 wins.
Absolutely.
I mean, and that's just it's confounding because a lot of times the principles of handicapping go out the window. But yeah, so it's so now in terms of how many, like, if you're handicapping an individual race, how many races of a horse will you watch on average? Is there a rule of thumb, or is it just case by case?
No, I mean, it depends on what I'm seeing. What I typically like to do is I like looking at the race notes and seeing if there's anything that I need to look at, that I think I need to look at. But when I'm seeing other things, and a lot of times, believe it or not, what I like to look at is it's kind of obvious when you see a horse winning, and when you see a horse that's on the lead and he just, gate to wire, or you see a horse coming from behind and they win. The horse, believe it or not, where I find the most value is in the flat running lines, right? A horse that the running line is better than it looks. And those are the ones that I seem to, and I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a psychological thing that draws my eye. But, I am looking at the notes and everything and going back and seeing things. And a lot of times those notes are so exaggerated and so off base, it's not even funny.
Exactly. And I was just going to say
bumped at the gate, and it's just like, what I think the tail swished and hit him with one hair. And it was just like, but so it can be comical at times, but that's why you watch it, because then the note, you just draw a line through it because it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, the old days, I don't read them anymore, but the result charts were a great asset, particularly for the racing form, because if you saw a horse, you said, he broke well, shuffled back, checked, re-rallied, and then flattened out in the stretch. Well, if you look, and he finished 5th, now that's a horse I might bet back, because he obviously had a pretty troubled trip, and there were some variables there. And the other thing, I mean, this is more of an eye thing, like over the years you develop it. But my other thing is, like, particularly around Derby time, when we see all these maidens, they break their maiden and everybody gets all excited because they win by 10 lengths. And, I like to watch those replays because you can tell a lot just by the way the horse runs. And, I mean, emerging market definitely made a lot of sense if you watch the way he ran. I told these guys, Chief Wallaby, I'm still waiting for him to run back to that maiden.
Yeah.
That was so impressive. He was athletic, he just looked like a world beater. And he's never run the same way again. But visually, like you're saying, watching those race replays, just from the way they run, a lot of times if they win these races by 10, they can look like a total grinder in their running style. That they may be very one pace. They just caught a really soft field.
Right.
And I look for more of that athleticism. That's what I look for. But yeah, race replays obviously monster important.
But I would say, Alex, to go back to your question, it's rare that when I'm looking that I will watch more than two. It's very rare that I will watch 3 races of a horse, but 2 at the very most. And mostly it's looking at one race for some when I'm looking at certain lines, it's like, let me see this race because it looks like, this line looks a little weird. You can look at a lot of lines sometimes and they make sense. And sometimes it's just like this line and this race is a lot different than everything else.
Yeah, you need clarification. It's like, he looked like he was doing so well. And then all of a sudden, what happened? And of course, over the years, we all learn about trainers and how they go about things. And you couple that when you start to see, like if you see a we're going to talk about the Foster guys, by the way. But I'll just use this as a kind of an example. And this may say, I know Tim has a lot of really good content on the Foster, but I'll just say this. When a Bill Mott quality horse, second off the layoff, going into a race he's pointing for, 98 out of 100, you're going to get the optimum effort out of him. Obviously, that was not the case yesterday with Sovereignty. Now, that would be a race that immediately, like the next time Sovereignty runs, I'll go back and watch that again because it's like it doesn't fit,
right?
But I know from talking with Tim, he pointed some great things out that I was not aware of. He was there, and so Tim, please, if you would talk about Sovereignty or just the Foster in general.
Yeah, I look, going into that race, I made a couple of comments to a couple of people that I thought that field, even though it came up after the 2 scratches of the 2 Safi horses, it ended up being 5 horses. But I thought you had 4 solid classic type horses that were all trying to probably position themselves to run in the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. And obviously Magnitude now has punched his ticket to that race. But that was an extremely good race. And, being here local to the Louisville area and being right in Churchill's backyard and being able to go over to the track, when I want to, the Stephen Foster is probably the second best race at that track of the year after the Derby. I absolutely love that.
I love the Clark in the fall, but yeah. Because it's just a great weekend. It's my favorite weekend
is.
Year. But yeah, the Foster.
But anyway, let's go back and talk about this race and talk about the track. And a lot of people were talking about, look, let me back up. On Thursday, if anybody watched any of the racing on Thursday, there was a delay and we got a lot of rain Thursday overnight into Friday. We got even more. Look at some of the flash flooding. If you haven't seen some of the news, look at some of the flash flooding in the state of Kentucky. The governor has declared a state of emergency in the state. There have been at least 4 deaths, and it has been pretty significant.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so flash flooding all over the place. That's how much water we got, people, on the track. So going into Saturday morning, it was still raining right up until noon. When I walked into the track right before the first race, first post time was 12:45. I was walking in about 12:20, and it was barely sprinkling. For the first race, that held. During the second race, while the horses were in the paddock, we got an absolute torrential downpour. And then it started lightning and thundering, and the horses actually went out on the track, and then they came back inside. So only about 10 or 15 minute delay for weather, and then they got back out, ran that race, and ran the rest of the day. Well, after that race, it didn't rain until we were leaving, going to our car after the last race. So, but what happened was the track was very sloppy. But that track at Churchill, one, it's a cuppy surface. Okay, it's a little bit heavy and it's different. But when that that track drains very well, but when it gets a lot of water, that sloppy condition makes it extremely fast. But it started after that second race when we didn't, the heat was there and it started drying out. Well, you're not going to dry out that much water, but the water disappears off the surface. They were sealing it a little bit and it went from sloppy to muddy. That is a different animal from the slop that Sovereignty won the Kentucky Derby in. Okay, so one, it's a very heavy and it makes it extremely difficult, which is why you saw things like Magnitude going out and, you know, on the front end and just running away from everybody. It makes it extremely difficult to close from further back, even though Baeza closed up, and that's just because Sovereignty and White Abarrio were going backwards. But Johnny B on Willie D, you know, he was never going to keep pace with Magnitude, so he backed up. But it is very much, somebody, Silver Charm just said it's a sticky dirt. It's very much, it's a cuppy surface is what they call it to begin with. But when the water sits on it, it's okay. But when it starts drying out and the water drains away, it just becomes heavy and boggy. I guess that's the best way I can describe it. And the muddy surface is very different there. And Sovereignty, he just looked at me like he didn't like it. He just really
I thought so. I mean, my observation, Tim and I talked about this. You know, I know from experience, you can really tell when a horse doesn't like a track. And the reason how you tell is what you saw with Sovereignty yesterday. They start out and they're running on the surface they don't like. So they go, I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. And what happens is they get frustrated and all of a sudden they kick it into high gear because they're like, oh, I hate them. They're mad. Like they're frustrated. And what happens? They flatten out in the stretch because they just don't like it. And that's what I think. Watching Sovereignty, I thought he was too far back for the nature of the way the track was playing. But I started to have hope because all right, Judy's got him going. Look at him. He's moving on the back. And he was moving very swiftly. And he got right up to Magnitude. And then what happened? He flattened out because he didn't like it. I think that's that's a really great point. I mean, I wouldn't have come up with that.
Yeah, and you know, White Abarrio, everybody knows, Alex knows, I've got the White Abarrio hat, which I wore on the track yesterday. I'm one of his biggest fans and have been since his 2-year-old season. When he finished third in the Kentucky Jockey Cup for the 2-year-olds that year. That was his best finish at Churchill. He was like 15th in the Derby, and then yesterday he ran a bad race. He does not like the surface there. He's a Gulfstream horse, and he loves the track down there. And I just absolutely love that horse. He was my emotional favorite yesterday, but he was not the horse that I thought would win. And, actually, Dennis Trusty, right, Alex?
Oh, yes.
Well, Trusty and I were having a conversation in the paddock, and I was telling him that I actually, you can go back on X and look at a couple of my replies back, when Magnitude ran during his 2-year-old year, and he ran back in the what was the big race that he won? Which one was it?
The Risen Star.
The Risen Star, yes. When he won the Risen Star at 43-1, I was telling everybody that week that he was the horse to watch. And you can go back and look at my comment on Ed DeRosa's page, and I told him that. And there's a video that we did that I said right as he was going in, as we did a live response to that video, and I said that basically that he was a horse that you had to watch out for. And
now,
then
I have to interject this because, and this is how it works between Tim and I. He's usually the bride, and I'm the bridesmaid, but I did tip out Chunk of Gold at 80+1. And I did, and Tim was like, I don't think so. But I was thinking, watch out. Now, which was the greater call?
Yeah.
You make up your mind. But Magnitude, I thought, was just an insane call.
Yeah.
But I had Chunk of Gold.
But my point was, Magnitude came back, and since he came back and got through whatever it was that put him on the shelf and took him out of the Derby, he's been a different horse. And we got to remember this horse has now won almost $10 million. Okay. He just came from winning the Dubai World Cup over a horse. Maybe you've heard of this horse, Forever Young. Okay. Who I think is the best horse in the world right now.
Well, we're
And you
going to
know,
see him in the Whitney, I think.
yeah. So
Perhaps not Whitney, but we're going to see him.
it's going to be interesting. But look, it's always interesting when a horse comes back from the UAE as to whether or not they're going to be, you know, run first off the shelf. But everything for Magnitude said he was. I mean, he had a nice bullet going into the race, you know, and he just looked really sharp. And he's the type that for that track with the speed, that's how he loves to run. He's a gate to wire type, and you know, he just got out there and ran away from them, ran them off their feet.
He scared me, and I. You know, when I did my analysis of it, I said, I got to eliminate somebody.
Yeah.
And White Barrio, to me, the linchpin. Now, I'll admittedly say I discounted the issue with the track. I said, this horse knows how to run. He's fresh. And if he's fresh, he's got a chance. And he'd had enough time from the Oaklawn handicap.
Absolutely.
And I think he's confounded me because there's been many times I didn't think he had it in him, and he would run a big one. So I threw him in, and I knew Baeza would run well. And obviously, I think the difference is exactly what you said. I think Baeza didn't have any problem with the surface. The Sovereignty did, and the gate, of course. But yeah, I mean, I was telling Tim off the air. This year I have gained so much more respect for Steve Asmussen and what he does, because you know he's doing what Bill Mott has always done. Bill Mott was a master at bringing horses along, and you know by the time they may not do much at 2 or 3, but by the time they hit 4, he gets the most out of them. Look what Asmussen's doing, and I'll tell you the biggest angle for next year I'm going to be all over is Steve Asmussen and the Risen Star, because look what Chip Honcho did, and the year before look what Magnitude did, and it's a race he obviously likes to win, but yeah, I mean. That's great, Tim. I never would have come up with that. I mean, that's somebody who's at the track to see that and know that. That's not something I could have come up with. So I appreciate that. That is something I'm definitely going to, you know, be paying attention to when it comes to muddy tracks, as opposed to what kind of mud is it. You know,
and every track's a little bit different, but Churchill, it just has a surface that even the dirt when it's fast is still a little cuppy, and then it's completely different on the 2 types of wet surfaces. So just something to keep in mind. But we didn't get to talk about Baeza, the thing I was going to tell you. Here's the thing. Here's the thing about this horse to me, and everybody in the chat can disagree with me, but I say that this guy's always the wise guy horse, but never much to me. You know, people love to say he's a Grade 1 winner. He's a Grade 1 winner. He won the Pennsylvania Derby at Park.
I was there. And he beat Magnitude.
Come on, Alex.
I was there.
I know that. I'm just saying.
John and I were both there. It was. He
no,
turned
that's
right
not what
around.
I'm saying. I'm saying that's the best that's the best that he's got. Everybody, it's always the same. If he had gotten out of the gate, he would have won. If he had done this, he would have won. He always comes with that one big run, but that's all he's got. He's always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And it's just like I told Dennis that same thing in the paddock. It was just like he will probably finish on the board, but he's not winning. He's just never going to win.
Yeah, and it was. I sort of, you know, my thing was when I was doing the race. That's exactly. I said I can't put that horse on top with the gate issues. I just can't do it. But I love him. I've always liked him. That last year's Derby was about the easiest superfecta you could ever get. It was like Sovereignty, Journalism, Baeza. Box those 3 and go all underneath, and you got it. You know, no problem. But and in fact, you didn't even have to go all, because Final Gambit and there were like 2 or 3 others closes. But yeah, I mean, you know what? He's what he's turning into, sadly. And I hate to say this, and he's a better horse than this, but he's turning into another Sandman. You know, you just keep waiting for, and you know, I was telling everybody last year, you might as well toss that horse from the Derby, because I'm telling you, he is not going to win. And but he always looks like he's going to win, or he looks like he's going to take that next step, and it never comes.
Hey, Alex, will you highlight that question from Laura there about coming in late and about the figures? Because I want to
Oh yeah,
clarify some. I want to clarify.
Laura is one of our
Yeah,
great subscribers.
where
She
it says
never
hello,
misses a
Tim, coming in
show.
late.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me clarify what Silver Charm said about I like formulator. So I've always used it. I've been around this game for 50 years,
That's
and
Devin, by the way.
I've always been a daily racing form guy, and I do still use formulator on daily racing form. But when it comes to speed figures, I'll say two things. The daily racing form has buyer speed figures. I look at them. I don't think they're the best speed figures, but here's the other thing. I'm not really a speed figure guy anyway, because I think they're one measurement of horses. And when you look at them, they all in a way kind of compare horses to horses in a way. But I look at other things to where, just like yesterday, I can't remember what race it was, but there were horses to where the buyer speed figures were 80s and 90s. And my top pick had a buyer speed figure of 70s. So it's just like speed figures isn't everything. He was an improving horse, and I can't remember which one it was now on the Churchill card, but that was just one example. It's just like I look at it as one data point. To me, it's a numbers thing to where everything's a data point, and you just take it with a grain of salt. And I would rather have a horse with a lower speed figure improving than those with the gaudy figures that haven't done anything as of late.
And to your point, this is a little thing I brought up about California, and one of the things, I mean, California, the stock isn't as good. We all know that. But, the thing is, there's so much sameness.
Yeah.
They all run like 85 Brisnet
Yeah.
numbers. So to your point, you can almost toss that because they're all the same. So you have to find those other things. Like here's a Delmar angle that we got Delmar coming up. I'll throw out there. You probably know this one, Tim. Unusual Heat is the greatest Delmar sire. I made more money off of that horse. Any his stock, Unusual Heat. Love Delmar. So now there's a variable right there that it doesn't really have anything to do with speed figures. It's like Saratoga with Speightstown get. They all love it. Munnings, anybody on that line. And they're going to be elevated because they're on a track they're going to like we did with Den on Bourbon. Maxfield Street Sense, that's a sire for the course. Churchill and Davey, he looked like he was going to win the Derby for a little bit there, but just to your point. Yeah.
No, and to your point, I feel very much the same way. Speed figures are supposed to be the great equalizer and supposed to be able to compare, different tracks and different distances and different surfaces and everything. But I think they do a poor job of that. They give you an estimate based on a track time and, a so-called variant. But one thing to your point is that California races, when they come to the Kentucky circuit, whether it be Keeneland or Churchill, which are my two big tracks that I prefer to play, they're basically a toss for me. If you look at them on speed figure wise, I mean, they're comparable just about in every race and many times the best. And they don't perform to that level compared to the figures of the other horses at a different race. So take it with a grain of salt. But just to give you an idea, yesterday Magnitude got a 114 buyer. I mean, that's just.
Yeah, and the thing about buyers that I always say is there are a lot of moving parts to them.
Yep.
The variant, and it's only the final time. It doesn't.
And the wet times are always much faster.
Right, and then, and there's the other thing that we got a question about, and Laura, we're going to get to your question in a sec. I'm going to put it up here, but I want to talk about something else before we get to that, if that's all right. I talked about California, and a lot of people are like, well, their buyers are so much higher. The times are going to be faster. It's a faster surface. And they've tried to make it safer because for a while there, it was totally unsafe because it was they had a lot of rain, they had problems. But that's why they work, even the claiming horses work every single week. They have to keep them fit to run on it. So if you know that, that's why every year, when I was a buyer guy, every year was like, how good are the California horses? The buyers aren't going to tell. We don't know. And there were a couple of years there where it's like, oh, this one looks pretty good, and you listen to somebody like Andy Byers, like they stink. this is way back when I started, but speed figures are, yeah. I mean, the Brisnet. I like the Brisnet numbers because I think they're very consistent. God, I love it when the Brisnet numbers are different from the buyer. When you see a 114 buyer for magnitude, you'll probably see like a 104 for Brisnet. And the gaudier the buyer number is, the better I like it, because that means the Brisnet number is going to be more realistic. But anyway, let's see what Laura asks. She goes, what else do you look at, please, and how do you weigh them? I think that's just handicapping variables, Tim. Laura came in a little bit.
So I kind of went through a little bit earlier, Laura, some of the things that I look at, but just one of the biggest things, the thing that I weight the highest is pace and running style. And for a given race, I'm very much a trip handicapper in looking at pace and how I project the pace to be in a particular race, and how the running style of a particular horse fits that race. For example, do we have a 5-horse race, 2 speed horses, a couple that are going to be just off, and a mid pack and a closer? And then, project the race out, much like with the Stephen Foster yesterday, knowing that Magnitude wanted to go out, that Willie D was going to probably press him, or Barrio was going to sit off of him, Sovereignty was going to sit off of him, and Baeza was going to be all the way in the back and going to make one run. And if you look at it, that's pretty much the way it came out. I mean, but that was a very predictable race. I wish they were all that easy.
Well, I mean, that, and you guys know who watched my post, the way I do the visual that's exactly why I always put E, EP, P, and S, because that's going to give you a really good idea of what the race shape is. That's what Tim's talking about. It's the race shape. It's so important because
it is.
If you think about it, when I handicap a race, when you see those E, EP, P, and S, I start with E, and I look at the E horses, and I go, all right, now what kind of speed are we going to have? And then I'll look at the EPs, then I'll look at the Ps, and then the S. And that's all about determining the race shape. And once you know the race shape, and it's very, like most of us, when we start out, we handicap race, you go 1, 2, 3, and you go right down the list of the entrants. But if you can discipline yourself to look, just go through it. Even the racing form, who's an E? Okay, who are the E's? How many have I got? How fast do they run? Okay, does that mean it's going to be a speed duel? Is it going to be blistering? Is there only one E who can dominate the field? That's what he's talking about, the race shape, and that's incredibly important thing. But thank you for clearing that up, Tim.
Yeah.
Listen, we got a question from Mr. Tyler Carter, who is a descendant of one of the founders of Rhode Island. I learned last week where I'm from, and Tim is being an old Air Force guy. He knows where I work too, Quonset Point, and building submarines. So anyway, sidebar. Tim, a question I have for you, just to feel out who you are as a person, who is your favorite horse of all time?
Oh, this is an easy question for me because it's my claim to fame as it is, growing up around the horse business. I said, if you were here a little bit earlier, that my uncle worked on a horse farm growing up, and I spent a lot of time, getting to work around the horse farm and getting to be close to the horses. And it wasn't a major operation. It's not one of the big names that anybody would know. However, one of the horses that I absolutely loved as a young person just getting into racing was, I got to see the big, affirmed Alydar races of 77, but I'm a 78 guy in Seattle Slew. And Seattle Slew
was 77. Affirmed was 78.
I got it backwards. That's what I meant. But I go back to Seattle Slew, and it's just like I actually loved that horse. It was one of the first horses that I actually got into seeing, winning the Triple Crown like that when I was really following racing. And here's my claim to fame: we actually took a mare and to breed to that big 18-hand black horse, and it was just like he was a monster. He was a big one, and it was just like just being able to be right there next to him while we bred a mare to Seattle Slew, and being so close and up close to him, and just seeing him in that capacity, and taking a mare back knowing she had a little slew inside her. As a young teenager, it was pretty cool.
I'll tell you from my perspective, when I was a kid. And my mother was always really into horse racing, really into it. Like she'd be like the Derby time. She'd be like, "Oh, Summer Squall," like couldn't stop talking about him. And I wasn't there yet, but we always had in the back of my grandfather owned horses and so on and so forth. But anyway, I will say this: one of the first horses that I remember, and I still to this day, as a matter of fact, for just imposition, like Seattle Slew was imposing.
Yeah.
And I really always remember
Physically.
oh my God, he just was like, oh, look at him. He just wants to rip their heads off.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the one thing about him of all horses that I remember is that was the thing with Seattle Slew. And even I was watching, a documentary about him as a stallion. He used to still run once a week. He'd run a mile, even into his 20s. But they just Mickey, his owner there, Mickey, whatever his last name is, I can't remember. He's got the crop and the rein and he's walking along with him. And I was like, jeez, he's just he's menacing. I mean, he must have. We were talking about it last week. Somebody was asking, do you think the horses know who they're running against, and do they remember them? And I think they do. And I think they saw Seattle Slew probably that time of the Belmont. Were like, I don't think so, guys. Who's playing for second? There's a trivia question. Who finished second in all those Triple Crown races?
To Slew?
Yeah.
It wasn't the same the horse, was it?
I think it was. I know he finished second in the Derby and the Preakness. I'm pretty sure he finished second in the Belmont, too. Run, Dusty, run.
That is right.
Anyway, more trivia.
You're right.
More useless knowledge. But yeah, he was a I mean, he's let's see. Okay. Oh, Father Sean O'Neill. I forgot all about him. He's come on board. I think he trusts the prophets every once in a while. Tim, thank you for coming on tonight. Yesterday, I believe I handicapped the races in the last 5 well, bet the special, pick threes, etc. But it went pretty chalky. How do you wager big days like yesterday? Do you like that, Sean?
Here's the thing about every race day. I don't think it varies. And whether it's the biggest day or it's the card in the middle that has no stakes races and lots of claimers, and I don't think that you approach it differently. First of all, looking at the PPs and the way you handicap should be the same every time. You should have a methodology, and you should do it and stick to it and rate the horses the way you rate them, and then figure out how you're going to wager. And here's the thing. Approaching it is probably the hardest part, because there's a difference. I think that there's a big difference that a lot of people have in handicapping, picking winners, and betting horses, because they're 3 separate things. Okay. Yes, picking winners, I don't think is as difficult as betting the races and trying to turn a profit. Because it's easy to say this is the best horse and this is the horse that should win the race. But if that's what you're betting every time, you're going to lose. You're going to lose more times than not. Because even at the tracks with the highest rating, favorites win 40% of the time. So you're going to lose 60% of races. And when you win, because they're the favorites, they're not going to pay much. So you have to approach it from a perspective of you're trying to, this is a term I heard, which I love. You're trying to buy a price, not a horse. Okay. With your wagering, you're trying to buy a price, not a horse, which means that you're trying to find value. And everybody loves that term value, but what does that mean? Well, my value is not the same as Alex's value.
I'm going to tell you right now exactly what Tim means. I'm going to break in for a second here. Tim and I are at Keeneland, and we're going over the pick 5. And Saudi Crown first race, I'm like free square, right? Tim bet that. I didn't. he made money on it. You know why? He had the exacta, and he put a big win bet on a horse. I think it was Saudi Crown. There was a big time like lock winner, and that's the kind of race I look at sometimes. I have to find a big price underneath for an exacta with a horse who's really short.
Right.
That's the way I do it, and I know Tim looks for value too. I don't want to say you don't, but Ben Tornado, Breeders' Cup,
right,
all over him all day long, and he made money on that. Now you wouldn't think so because it was a short price, but he made money on that because there's a
and here's the way you do it. Here's what I love to say. How do you turn a 6 to 5 even money, 4 to 5, 2 to 5 into a 4 or 5 to 1? And that is, you have a really strong opinion on a horse that you absolutely love, who is better than everybody else, or who is being overlooked on the board, who you still think is going to be the underneath horse. And it's like, I don't love betting horses like Saudi Crown when I feel it's going to be first pick, second pick, third pick. But if I've got a value horse underneath, and I've done this many times, it's like playing a really strong exacta, and I'm talking, $20, $25, $50 even, exacta straight, Saudi Crown over this horse. And it's just, that is how you turn an even money horse into a 5 to 1. And
that's the hardest thing for new handicappers to do, is to bet cold.
You know what the hardest thing for them, I will disagree. That might be the second hardest. You know what the hardest thing for them to do is? Pass on a race.
Yes, exactly. I've said that too. You know what? Here's the thing I said this year for the Derby, because we hadn't done live feeds before, so they just heard my presentation. But I said, listen, the Derby, it's just a horse race. It's a great race. It's a race we all love to watch.
It's the best wagering race of the year.
Sure, but if you don't hit it, don't kick yourself.
It's
unless
hard.
you think you made a mistake. And if you made a mistake, go back and learn from it. Yeah. But hey, you got 20 horses. There's a million things that can happen. Yeah. How many times have you or I had the horse we thought was the best horse on the day? We were all over him, and something happened. A Fleet Alex, 2005. I mean, he was my horse. I was all over him. He ran a great race. He still almost won the damn thing. But they had to use him all day to get into position. It happens. But you can't kick yourself. And conversely, if you have a race that sucks, don't bet it. If you don't have an opinion, if you don't have a strong opinion, let it go.
The best out there, and I'm not talking handicappers, I'm talking bettors. The best bettors out there know when to bet and when to pass. And that is how you make money in this game. And look, I'm not saying that I make this a profitable game, because I'll just tell you I don't. But in doing better than many, it's that you have to pick your spots. You have to have opinions, and you have to bet your opinions, and bet them. I'm pretty, Alex will tell you that I'm a guy that says bet with conviction. I love that term, and people say all the time, oh, you should have boxed that. Well, here's the thing about boxing. I'm not a box guy. I'm a key guy. When you're boxing 3 horses in a trifecta, as an example, here's what you're saying. All 3 of those horses have equal probability to win, come in second, and come in third. I don't believe that. Right. I don't believe anyone who handicaps should be handicapping in that way. I may think there's 1 and sometimes 2 horses. Well, I think these 2 are really close, but most times you should have a horse you think is the horse you want to win on top. And when I bet trifectas, most of the time I'm a trifecta key guy. I'm going to key 1 horse on top of maybe a couple, maybe 2, 3, 4. And that's typically a structure that I would play, because if you wager in a box 3 horses, you're betting 6 combinations. Even if you hit the trifecta, you had 5 losing tickets. If let's say you box everything for $1, that's a $6 ticket. If I key for $1, 1 horse over 2 horses, that's a $2 ticket. So for the same $6, I can have the trifecta 3 times when you can box it once. And yeah, boxes are for shoes. That's for sure. I don't like boxes. I think that, basically you're having way too many losing tickets. And that's a thing that people struggle with, is just like the caveman tickets for horizontals. I will never do it. Here's a quick story for you, Alex. Let me tell you this one real quick. So the weekend after I was with you at Keeneland, the second weekend, I was with Sean, and going into Saturday, they had a 2-day carryover on the pick six, okay, which is unusual. And carryovers are something I love because we don't have time to get into it, or maybe we do. But one of the big things that you got to consider when you're making your wagers is takeout. Takeout is the tracks taking a big portion of that pool, and you got to watch what pools and know what the takeout is at every track and every pool.
And that's the argument against boxing too, because the takeout kills you.
You're killing yourself. But anyway, so here's the thing. When you have a couple of day carryover like that, like when I go into my ADW, that they've got a carryover section. That's the first thing I look at. What are the big carryovers for the day? Because those are the pools I want to be in. But that 2-day carryover and a pick six, I put together a pick six ticket because I had some really strong opinions. And here are my thoughts about a pick six sequence. For 6 races, to pick 6 races is hard to do for anybody, right? And that's why you see people with the big caveman tickets. But I need really 2 things, ideally 3, but I need 2 things to have a pick six ticket that I love. I need a solid single. I had that. I actually had 2, which is the best case. That's the 3rd scenario. But here's the second thing I love, and this is the biggest thing in racing that I think is the best advantage everybody has: false favorites.
Oh,
so
God, yes.
I need a single, and I need a horse that everybody else is going to single that I'm against. And when I got that, I've got money. But here's the thing that I did on this day. I cut myself short because I went too thin. I bet a $36 ticket. Now on normal days, you guys chime in the chat. If you bet a $36 ticket and get back $1,300, most people are going to be happy. Okay. And that's what happened to me. But I hit a 5 out of 6 and got a consolation, and I got the consolation, 3 or 4 times, and I ended up with about $1,300. But anyway, I was disappointed because I hit 5 out of 6. And in the sixth leg, the one that I didn't hit, the horse that I absolutely loved was the 3rd favorite. And I did something that I always preach against, and that's putting another horse on my ticket that I didn't like instead of the horse that ended up winning, which would have been a horse that I should have added and didn't. And that pick six that day, I got back $1,300, but if I hit that 6th leg, it paid $95,000.
Brutal. Well, I tell you, to piggyback on top of that, we just finished Royal Ascot, and these guys know I love Royal Ascot. But I'll tell you something, that in my post, I talked about the Omni Swinger, because some of those 2-year-old races are just ridiculous. There's 25 horses in them, and it's tailor-made for an Omni Swinger bet, especially if you don't follow European racing regularly. But here's the thing. You can play an Omni Swinger with 5, 6 horses, and they can all finish 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, or 1st and 3rd, or 2nd, 3rd. So you got a lot of combinations, but the payouts usually suck. And more often than not, I mean, the trap that a lot of people fall into is they won. Okay, you won, but what'd you win? You know, and I told this story. You'll get a kick out of this, Tim. I was with the racing dudes up at Saratoga. They were there, and Jared had his girlfriend. She bet on every horse in the race. And I knew about this in advance, so I went up to her and said, "For God's sakes, why would you do that? You're betting against yourself." She goes, "I want to be happy." Okay, you picked the winner, great, but you lost money. You're probably going to lose money unless you're dutching or staggering or something, but I just want to feel happy that I won. Well, so that's the bet. That's what I mean, the Omni Swinger. I mean, I remember I hit the Superfecta for the Belmont when Essential Quality won it. And I was looking, and there were a couple of decent prices in it, and I'm thinking, this might pay pretty well, $60. It's for a Superfecta. So
well, that goes back to my point that I was saying, which was one of the first points of wagering when you learn to wager, is that handicapping and betting are not the same thing. And you got to learn that you can't, it's not about picking winners. You have to buy a price, not a horse.
Yeah.
And
there's great handicappers and there's great bettors.
Yeah.
I mean, there's guys. Now, I'll give you an example, and Lord forgive me, but Jonathan Kinchin is I think he's a great bettor. He's a great contest player. Pretty good handicapper, but I think he's a better bettor.
Yeah.
Than he is Mike Somich. Some of you guys know from Beeson or Racing Dudes.
Right.
Good guy, pretty good handicapper, but he's just a great bettor. He just knows how to bet and when to bet. And Tim's right on when he says you got to know when to bet. And it's okay if you want to throw $5 on a horse when you don't have a strong opinion, just to have a stake in the race. But you don't want to make a habit of it. It's better to just look at a race card. And if you can find that honey hole, that one race where you can just hammer a 30-1 shot that you're confident is going to win, doesn't really matter what happens the rest of the day. You clean up. And that John Stetton always says, you pick your spot, wait for the strike. And it's not easy to do because we all want to bet every single race. Gio said he bets every race because he handicaps every race. And
I was told very early on, from a bunch of old guys when I was a young guy at the track, and now I'm the old guy. But it's just like, and here's what they said: do you want to win races or do you want to win money?
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Let's get to a question, Tim, if I may. Laura's got another one. This goes back to something you were talking about earlier, and you're the right guy to talk to because you love maiden races. Tim, how would you handicap a maiden race, in particular first-time starters?
Well, to be honest, it goes back to my formula, and it really doesn't change much. So when you're looking at a maiden race, I said the first thing that I look at is pace and running style. You're not going to have that a lot of times, okay? But there is a way to extrapolate that from the data if you're looking at things like some of the works. And I'm talking not looking at workout times. I'm talking about watching works. There are ways to watch works. Listen, I'm gonna cut this off for a quick 30-second pitch here, Alex. Here's one of the reasons, besides being my home track, that I love Keeneland. Okay, Keeneland not only gives you free programs every day, which have the past performances on them that you can get on their website. Keeneland has a database of all their races. I downloaded every meet, and because it updates with all the last meets races, and it has all of that data available that you can, it's in an Excel sheet, it's in a CSV file, you put it in Excel, and you can twist it around and turn it and get, what horses have won this race at this distance, at this condition. And it's just like, it's so valuable. But here's another thing about Keeneland that is great. They put on their website all of their works, and you can watch the videos. And that's invaluable when it comes to maiden races, to be able to go back and watch those. So
it is. And you got to know who you're working with. But
back to my basics. So that'll give you a little bit about pace and running style. And if some of the maidens maybe have a race, you can kind of look at that a little bit. But here, the number 2 thing that I told you that I look at for the most part is class level, right? What are the classes, and how do you determine class level for horses at that, that are starting out as a maiden? Pedigree. Right. So it's looking at pedigree, and pedigree is an important part for maidens. I'm not a big pedigree guy. I'm not your guy that's going to talk about third and, all these crosses and all this stuff. I'm not that guy, but I do know enough about sire stats. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Saratoga, it always used to drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Listen, when they're always like, he's a half to so-and-so, he's a half. He's got to run. They got plenty of duds. There's all right.
And he's also a half to a bunch of horses who never even made it to the track.
There you go. And here's the best example of all: Secretariat and the Bride.
Yeah.
Both came out of something royal. Both bred the Bold Ruler. The Bride, I don't think ever won a race. Never ran. Secretariat's a legend.
Exactly.
There you go. So it's not when they say the only one that when they're out of Puka, I pay attention because Dornoch, Mage, Baeza, pretty good. But anyway.
So somebody was asking earlier about all my weighted factors. I will tell you, one of my weighted factors that I have in every race that I handicap is I have a jockey trainer value. And I think it's an important part. It's not a significant part for many races, but here's another thing. For maiden races, it kind of makes a difference. Let me give you an example. When you're running a sprint race for babies, maiden special weights at Keeneland, Wesley Ward wins 64% of the races. 64%. And if he's got Joel Rosario up, that bumps up about 8 percentage points. Every time Joel's up, they win at even a higher click. So it's just an example of jockey trainer angle. So there are a lot of things that go into it, like with everything. But, the big thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at works, not just workout times. I'm going to try to look at the works, look at workout notes. A lot of times you can actually buy those things from the clock trackers, the track clockers, should I say? I said that backwards. From the track clockers, you can buy those products and get those clocker notes, and those things are pretty invaluable sometimes when you're looking at maidens. Yeah, just bet Jose because he is on fire. He won 4 races yesterday.
Laura, it is like anything else. It's going to take a little time. You're going to get a feel for it. You will. I will tell you a really important thing. I'm sure Tim will back me up on this. Frequency of workouts. You want to see one every week, every 7 days. When you start seeing those gaps in the tab, I think I saw a maiden race today. He was a short price, and I threw him out immediately because I looked at his work tab, and they were like over. He had 3 works over like a month and a half, and there were like 10-day gaps in between. That means there were problems. It might have been a temperature, might have been quarter crack, whatever it is. When they get interrupted in their training, they can't be as good. So you might want to bet them back when you start seeing regular works out of them.
Right.
But that's a big, really important thing. You want to see that frequency, and a lot of them. I like to see
and there are little quirks and little things you can look at. Like for me, for example, I don't want to see a string of like three gate workouts for a first time starter. That means they're having trouble in the gate, so they're working the gate over and over and over. So I don't want to see that. I don't even like seeing 2 back-to-back gate workouts, coming into their first race. I like to see them having some, the gates that are further back, and now they've got works that are not with the gate because they've already solved that problem. If all of their works coming into the race are gate work, they're still doing the gate work because we haven't figured that out yet.
Speaking of which, Tyler asks, I am newer to the scene. It's no secret, as everyone here knows, I love Baeza. Yes. My question is, have there been any other examples of a horse having gait problems? Has it been fixed? Obviously not, because he blew it in the gate again. When you see an older horse who's having gate works, that's a major red flag. I pointed out in my post. It's like, I love Baeza, but I can't do it. Yeah. Not when Bill Mott is putting gate works on a horse. That's a major problem, and he'll fix it. I have total belief Bill Mott will fix it. But anyway, what do you remember any other horses with gait issues? I mean, Golden Pal, the time he didn't break well.
Yeah, consistent gait. I mean, there are always gait issues, like Barbaro in the Preakness comes to mind. When Barbaro got injured. You remember that?
Broke my heart. It was one of my favorite horses of all time, and I broke that from the Holy Bull when he won on the slop, and he didn't have it that day, and he still won. I was on his bandwagon for the rest of his career.
But here's the thing. As far along as he is on his career, I just don't know that he's going to fix it.
There are a lot of horses that can fix it. It can be done. Secretariat was not a bad breaker. He broke slowly because he had his ass up against the back of the gate, and they had to fix that. These are a lot of the things they can fix. And also, there's a lot of jockeys who are great out of the gate. That's a big help too. Some of them aren't so aren't the greatest out of it, but it is definitely something that can be fixed, especially at a 2-year-old. You can definitely fix it. But
that's why I was saying that the point by Baeza is you wonder if it's. And you know what, he's he's a horse that's going to want to be at the back and close, and you have to wonder if they're just saying, well, we don't care that he gets out of the gate slowly because he's going to want to be at the back anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it could very well be but it's, you know, as we talked about with Sovereignty last year, what was the mark of his improvement? He went from a closer to a stalker. He kept getting closer and closer as he progressed. And I was hoping we were going to see that with Baeza. The only time I saw him do it is at Jim Dandy, where he gave Sovereignty all he could handle, and he still couldn't beat him. But next question is from Debbie, who is Silver Charm. That's her name. So, Tim, how many Breeders' Cup races do you choose to play on average? Just curious. Look, I know you don't play Friday a lot.
That's what I was about to say. On Friday, almost nothing. Even the big juvenile races, probably, you know, maybe if I have a really strong opinion, but for the most part, I'm just watching races on Friday. Now, Saturday, I'll be honest, I probably most of the time I play most. I won't say I play all because, you know, there are probably going to be a couple of races, and I'm talking about the Breeders' Cup races. If they have any of the early stuff, I don't play them. But the Breeders' Cup races, I will play most of them because, again, it's about opinions. And one of the things that I said early on, when you're looking at the kinds of races, when stakes races, when you have the big days and the big horses, you typically are able to better handicap and have a better opinion, and everybody's out to give their best. So when that happened, you know, everybody wants to talk about how much race fixing's in and how the trainer's intent and this. Everybody knows the trainer's intent at the Breeders' Cup win, right? And unless you've got two horses in and maybe one's a rabbit, and you kind of know that. But you kind of know what they are. But there still may be races to where occasionally there'll be a race on the card and it's just like, I just can't figure this race out. I just don't like it, and I just don't play it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, it goes back to, you know, when it's Derby day, you're like, oh, I got to bet all the races. Well, if the race sucks or you can't figure it out or you don't have an opinion, pass. You know, I mean, throw $5 on a guess. If you really can't make up your mind, if you have to play it, do something like that. But you know, Breeders' Cup is that's why, you know, I like personally Friday because the one angle that I got, I forget who always tells me that they thank me forever because I gave them Valentina in the juvenile fillies turf, box the Europeans. It's the only time I box because they're all fat and they all, I mean, last year, oh, what was it? Valentina and Ground Support was second, I think. And they were like 28 and 50 to 1. I think some crazy number. And then when Stad, Tim was all over Stad. I was not, but I had Stark Contrast at 50 to 1 for the Sabre exact. But
yeah, Stad was a single for me that day. I don't know if you remember our broadcast that day, but in the late, it was like pick 3, 4, 5 terminating in that last race. And it was just like, they were just lining up. We had a really big day that day when we did our broadcast.
Oh yeah, no, but I can tell you the great. I'm going to just give an aside here. The greatest feat I consider Tim has ever had was one night on. I think we were playing Turfway, and you guys came up with the super high five. Cold.
That was Assiniboia, and that was me.
Cold. Now, when I say cold, that means first, second, third, fourth, and fifth straight. No wheels, no nothing. And I was there, and I can attest to it. I couldn't believe it. And,
yeah,
they were going so well. They were like, oh, what the hell? Let's go for the super high five.
Well, no, here's the thing. So we really had the race handicapped pretty well. And we go through the way that we would do it on Trust the Prophets is we would go through and we give our opinions, and then we would have a bet. Well, I had a really strong opinion in the trifecta and even in the order. So I had the three horses in my mind, you know, 1, 2, 3 as the top three. And then Colin Sheehan, he just out of the blue, he said, Tim, give me the high five. So I went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I just spit out the other two, and I did it literally just like that. But I spit out the other two horses based on my next two horses. And you know, Alex was there; he will tell you.
I I
Nailed
couldn't
it.
believe it. I couldn't believe it, but they did. I was just like, holy shit. Now I've seen everything because, but it is a funny thing. I wonder if Tim's ever had this happen. When you're going well, when you're hot, I mean, it almost feels like you could just point at a horse and he's going to win for it.
That was Derby Day 25 for me. That was the best handicapping day I've ever had. I think there were 2 races on the day that I did not have the winner in like my top 2. And it was like only in those 2 races did I not have like exacta, trifecta, superfecta. I gave out on air the superfecta in the Derby, the sovereignty superfecta, which so many of us had. But, it was just like, I was just absolutely on fire that day. Huge day, even for not betting tons of money to win like 6K on a day, just it's a lot of fun.
And the thing that we always say, and I'm sure I've told you guys this before, and I know Tim will back this up. When you have these days like the Stephen Foster Day, for instance, or Belmont Day, or Derby Day, the undercards are where you can really cash. There's some really good opportunities in a lot of those races. It was Derby Day last year. I had Simply in front at 16-1. A couple years before that, I had No Balls at 38-1. And on Derby Day last year, I think I had like 3 or 4 all overlays, and the Derby was almost anticlimactic because I was like, I'm just so far ahead. I'm just having such a great day, But you guys are all, if you haven't had a day like that, you're gonna have one.
Yeah.
Just don't get. I mean,
it took me a lot of years to have a day like that. I've had some good days, but that was absolutely just one for the ages.
Yeah, I told these guys I had 11 in a row once, and that's, I don't expect to ever do it again, but it can happen. You just it's like I always say to these guys, there's races for everybody. The only difference is the longer you do this, the more races are for you. And if you think of it that way, so the longer you do it, you're going to see more things, and Tim's given some great time. Boy, I mean, a lot of this stuff I'd never thought of, and I'm doing this a while. The track thing was really, I'm blown away by that because I'll be honest, like you guys, I was trying to figure out what happened.
You want to highlight Laura's question there?
Yes, I do. She's been reading from my reading list that I have on my website, all the books I've ever read, starting with picking winners. And so, Tim, are you guilty of attaching yourself to a losing horse? Conversely, will you not bet certain horses and or trainer, jockey, just toss them, or is it all business? I think I know the answer to this, but go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely business. You can root with your heart, but you got to bet with your head. And I will just tell you, yesterday was a great example in the Stephen Foster. If you go to my X account, you will see that my profile picture is me wearing my White Barrio hat. And I absolutely love that horse. I'm his number 1 fan or number 2 fan with Rennie time. Rennie's also a big fan. So, but anyway, I love that horse. I was rooting for him. I did not have a single dollar on him.
Yeah, and that you have to be that way. It's nice to have heroes. I like the aspect of getting attached to a hard spun. My favorite. I mean, I love that horse. I got onto him from his very first start. I never let him go. And damn it, in the Derby, he near pulled it off. But after the Derby, and then when they tried to rate him in the Preakness, I was like, he's not going to win the Belmont. I'm going to have him in the mix, but I know he's not going to win. And sure enough, they put him back in the lead, and he wasn't a 1.5 mile horse. Curlin was, and Rags to Riches was, and he finished 4th. Second, third, fourth, but I love him. And I looked Baezi yesterday, and I said, I love that horse. I love him, but I just couldn't do it because the gate issues. It was just so obvious. He's got a problem that, and he'll beat me if Bill Mott figures it out, and maybe, but couldn't. couldn't go there. And the thing is, I did have a couple of you point out that I was wrong about magnitude, and I don't, I will say that I don't think I was necessarily wrong about him. I was wrong about sovereignty, but it was conditional. I think under all things being equal, I think you might see a different race than Tim, so eloquently pointed out about the track. But yeah, I mean, you can love horses, but you got to bet with your head. You got to. I mean, there's been plenty of times I don't want to bet this horse, but I have to.
Yeah, and it was just like I will say, Laura, that does not mean that I'm not, haven't attached myself to horses who have lost, because I've done that plenty. And there are certain examples when you follow horses for a while and you follow this game for a while, you look at a horse and there's just something about the horse and you think the horse might be something. And I'll give you an example. 2024, there was a horse by the name of Fierceness. That he's just a horse that I looked at him run and watched that horse and watched everything about him. And I think since the Kentucky Derby and since his 3-year-old year, he's proven a little bit better that, that he is a great horse. He's not one of the all-time greats. That's not what I'm saying, but he is definitely a horse that has some ability, and he's since proven that and gone on to prove himself a little bit. But going into that Derby, one thing about the Derby is I absolutely hate betting favorites, but that year I got sucked into to Fierceness a little bit and really just, I didn't have Mystic Dan and thought that Fierceness was definitely a horse that had some ability. And if he ran to his ability, which he didn't, that he had an opportunity.
And that was the only call for me. I tossed him.
Yeah.
And I just said, I can't, he's got too mercurial a running line that you just don't know with him what you're going to get. So rather than, I'll let him beat me. We say it all the time. I'll let a horse like that beat me.
Yeah.
Mystic Dan.
And that's what I do most of the time. And you just like I've said, you try to find the value and get away from that. And in a race like that, that is not value. And it's stupid. It goes against everything I believe. And I just saw something in a horse of what I thought was in a horse, and it just wasn't to be true. And I just have to point out down there, who was it said, Sovereignty is one of your best horses. If you look back behind me there, it's hard to see with my chair, but that is the winner's circle photo of Sovereignty winning the Kentucky Derby, signed by Mr. Junior Alvarado. This right here is the Maker's Mark bottle from the 151st Kentucky Derby last year, signed by, you can see the signature right there, Mr. Junior Alvarado. So I've got that back there. I love Sovereignty. He's a great horse. He came back this year. He looks so big and so nice. And the thing about him in that Oakland handicap was, Junior is a big friend of a great friend of mine and Alex's, and that's Sean Nolan. Sean's one of my great friends in the world. And, but these actually got signed by a friend here that I have here on Churchill Downs. He got both of those signed for me, and Junior took care of that. But Junior's a great guy. And I was talking to Junior's brother-in-law on the track yesterday, Brian, who's a good friend. But anyway, Sovereignty came back in that Oakland, and Junior actually said he couldn't hold him back. He was so keyed up after not running for so long and everything. And that's why he was on the lead and shouldn't have been on the lead, but he just couldn't control him, and he just had to let him go. So
my only thing has been, and I started this, not a rant, but this position in the Pegasus, because when Disco Time was the favorite, I said, I went back and I watched his replays. I said, there's no way he can win this race. He's beating up on, glorified claimers in that allowance race he was in. But my point was that a lot of the 4-year-olds are not doing well against older horses. And I was 95% on Sovereignty. I was like, he wins the Stephen Foster
on his best day.
On his best day. And I still think he can win.
Yeah.
But if you go back and Built was a horse who made some noise early in the Colin Sheehan's Derby horse.
Right.
Like to remind him on occasion, especially when he crapped out in the Pate Mile. But, he yesterday, I don't think he could have won that race. He ran well. He ran better than I thought he would.
Yes.
But with exceptions of Tim and I have a mutual love of Burnham Square. And I love that horse in the Derby Trail.
I loved him on dirt, but he's a turf monster.
Yeah, oh, isn't it amazing that it's like deterministic, but a better version, because deterministic was pretty good on the dirt, but once they moved to the turf, but a lot of them have not come back because we looked at it and said it was such a top-heavy class. It's like journalism, sovereignty, Baeza, and everybody else. So, and I tell you what, this year's 3-year-old crop, you can't judge them yet. You got to wait to see how they do against older, but it's looking the same thing. I don't know how many of these are going to be any good at 4, but
yeah, definitely it leaves a question. Laura, let me say this about sovereignty. He had the keyed up and coming off a layoff excuse for last race. I honestly think I will agree with the comment that someone said there that you have to question a little bit the trip and getting a little bit wide, but he did not like that track. I was watching him all the way around. I knew, even as he made his move, that he was never going to get there, and the track wasn't going to allow him to be able to close up on magnitude the way he was running. But let's give him his next race, okay? And if he comes and runs the next race, then he's progressed. If he doesn't do anything in the next race, you have to question what has happened since the layoff. And I will say this. You got to remember that he was scratched out last year of the Classic.
And that's what Father Sean is bringing up.
He spiked that fever, okay? And you have to wonder if maybe that was a little more serious than anybody knows.
I wouldn't bet.
And I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm not trying to tell anyone anything. I'm not breaking any news. I will tell you, I know nothing. Okay. But it makes you question, with what happened going into the layoff, whether or not it was something that was a little bit more significant.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like young kids who get pneumonia early on, and it stays with them the rest of their life. But I thought, if you consider that he obviously wasn't optimal for him yesterday, he still ran third, and I thought it wasn't a bad third because he did get to the top of the stretch. And by all accounts, it looked like he was just going to go right by magnitude, and then he just stopped.
Yeah.
And that's a case of, again, to me, it's fairly evident he didn't like the track because
that's what I think it was. That's what I'm going to chalk it up to, and that's why I say let's give him the next race. Let's see him up at Saratoga and see what happens. And I'm pretty sure that that's still where they're pointed with the goal of getting to Keeneland in October.
Yeah, if he doesn't run well in the Whitney, then we got to worry about it. Yeah, I mean, but.
I agree.
Again, I'm a broken record, but I trust Bill Mott implicitly, and he would not run that horse.
I totally agree with that. Just like everybody saw, the Preakness last year and everything that's been said about that decision, he would not run this horse if he was not ready to run. So I don't think it was anything other than not liking the track yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, it happens. I mean, we've seen, I think White Barrio is an excellent example. He just probably doesn't like Churchill very much. We looked for horses for courses all day. I'll tell you, not as if you guys didn't know, but there was a horse at Saratoga in the early 2000s, Pomeroy. You could not be, I don't care who you were, he couldn't be beat at 7 furlongs at Saratoga. Could not be beat. But you go to other tracks, he wasn't as good. They put him in the Breeders' Cup, and I could almost throw him out every race. Because if it wasn't at Saratoga, but he was a monster at Saratoga. It happens, Let's see. Oh, Paula's here. Hi, Paula. Let's see what you have to say. I also think Godolphin held him in Kentucky trying to decide if he was going to retire or not. Not working even lightly and keeping fit is not good.
I will tell you that from what I have heard from people in the know, that is not at all true. He's had a very specific course, and somebody else asked the question right above that about running in Dubai. And I'm not speaking for anybody. I'm just telling you insider info of what I've heard. They have a very specific pointed route, the races mapped out to get him to the Classic. and Godolphin wants a classic. So
And
that's
Bill
why
Montgomery.
Godolphin can run in Dubai anytime. They want the classic, and they think they've got a classic horse, and that has been their goal from what I have heard.
Because, you know, as I recall, I mean, Godolphin's been chasing the Derby forever. And the thing that they didn't do, this was a big problem that somebody apparently told Sheikh Maktoum, you know, trade him in the States. Because they take him to Dubai. Mendelssohn,
Yeah.
example of it. They take him to Dubai and they train him there, and then they bring him over for the Derby. This is back when it was graded stakes earnings, or it wasn't necessarily points, but it was like they would all crap out, you know. And then finally they're like, oh, well, maybe if we breed in the United States and we keep him there, what was it? The Oaks winner, Pretty Mischievous, immersive. You know, those are Godolphin horses. They finally learned maybe if we keep them here in training, they'll do better in the U.S. And so it makes perfect sense that they, you know, I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense to me. It's like, well, we've won the Dubai World Cup a million times.
Yeah,
we haven't won the Classic yet, so let's go for it.
And to Sean's point here about the Whitney, Sean, he's absolutely a bet against. I said you can excuse the race and you can make the case that hopefully he can still move forward. But for me, from a betting perspective, seeing what I just saw, he's still going to take money and probably be the favorite in the race. It wouldn't surprise me at all, even coming off of that effort. We'll see. But I think he's absolutely a bet against.
Well, very well.
Unless because of this, you get a big price and he seems to move forward, then he might be the right bet.
Yeah, I mean, he's good. He won the Kentucky Derby and he won the Travers. So at Saratoga,
right?
You know, but and it all depends on the field too. I mean, if you're going to get Barrio and Baeza, they're all going to be in journalism. You know, let's not forget him. Although I think he seems to be one horse who hasn't moved forward necessarily. I would say about him. I don't know why they put him in the Met Mile. I still can't figure that out.
Yeah, you can't make it a mental emotional thing there. Who did you say Silver Charm was? What was her name? Debbie. You can't make it a mental emotional thing, not with your money. You gotta learn to separate those two things. And that's why I just said two different things, that maybe you bet him and maybe you don't. And it all depends on it all depends on the value you get, the price you get, as to whether or not he's bettable or not, because you still got to handicap the race. You figure out what you think his probability is versus everybody else. And then based on the price, you have to determine whether or not those odds versus the odds you're getting or make him the better bet. That is the way you should approach every race.
Yeah. I mean, you know, to be honest, I was never a Curlin guy. I was a hard spun guy, but it was pretty clear Curlin was going to be pretty damn good, you know, and I left him off the Derby because I thought it was too early. I thought he didn't have enough foundation. Well, I was wrong. He finished third, but yeah, I mean, my point being is that you could be all over Curlin and love him and everything else, but if it's the Derby and not maybe necessarily the right spot, if you think, and Street Sense was a horse for the course, everybody knew he was going to win the Derby that year because he won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile by like 10 lengths, and he loved Churchill, you know. So you have to be that way. It's very difficult to detach yourself from emotional ties at times. It is very difficult to do, but you know, if you all it takes is a few bad beats and a couple trips to the ATM ought to tell you, you know, you got to bet with your mind. You got to bet with your head. You know, it's just the way it works. I mean, but it's not an uncommon thing, Debbie. It isn't, and it's very, very difficult to, you know, like Spin. He loves Centennial horses because he used to work for him, I believe, didn't he, Tim?
Right. Yeah. He grew up there because his father worked for Centennial. He knows
he'll be all over Antiquarian for the Suburban. I'm going up there for the 4th, and I'll guarantee you when I see him, he's going to be all over Antiquarian. But I haven't really looked at the race yet. I think he's got a pretty good chance.
You're
But
going next weekend?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the this. Just as a side note, in where I live in Rhode Island, we have the oldest continuously running Fourth of July parade in Bristol, Rhode Island, which is the town over from where I live, and I've been to it maybe 30 times in my life, and I said I'm not going again until I'm marching in it. And what if I have to choose between dealing with all the people who come in from out of town just to see the parade and all the traffic and all the other crapola, and I can go to Saratoga and have a really nice day. Kind of decisions made for me, but I'll go. I'm going to be there for the Whitney. I'll be there for the Travers. I can't go to the Haskell. That's another track, Tim. If you haven't been to Monmouth, I
I've
like
been
it.
to Monmouth.
Oh, hey, I like it a lot.
Yep.
Let me see what else I got here. I'm trying to catch up with all these comments that I'm missing. And as these guys know, I'm a greenhorn when it comes to. Let's see. Okay, I love somebody else. Debbie loved Pomeroy. Okay, I feel I know that a prime for everyone beats him now. Magnitude taking on Nisos. I'll take Magnitude in that one every single time at the right distance, I should say. Let's see. Maybe he's just not the super horse everyone thought he was as a 3-year-old. Journalism and Baez are nice, but that's who he beat. They haven't done much either. There's some weight to that, Sean. But again, from what I saw yesterday, I knew the Oakland Handicap Sovereignty would not be 100%. I almost threw that race out because I know the way Bill Mott trains. It's more of a concern what happened in the Foster, but you just got the explanation as to probably what it was. And the way he ran told me he was in top form. It was just the track. And you can, like I say, you can tell when a horse doesn't like the track. It's very obvious. And I think that might have been an example. I think it's probably likely. He'll be fine.
Look, Alex, it's one of my favorite things looking at PPs to be able to find value in a horse is to look at a horse who's really good, has one bad race. People are going to toss him out. And I'm like, oh, he had a bad race because it was an off track and he didn't like it. Draw a line through it and look at the rest of the races and be like, man, this horse has value. And it's just like you can't be afraid to draw a line through something that seems like an anomaly. Sometimes you might be wrong, but on the times that you're right, when it provides the value, I will tell you those times will pay for the times you're wrong.
Laura, I'm going to tell you, and I did say this in my presentation. Magnitude was a horse I was very nervous about, and I'll tell you why. Of any other trainer, most of the horses who come back from Dubai need a lot of time, and even when they come back, they run a race in the States. They don't do well, except Steve Askerson, because Obliteration, who Tim and I sadly liked in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, and didn't happen, but Obliteration came back from Dubai and ran fine. I gained a ton of. I already had a lot of respect for Steve Askerson, but I'm the biggest fan of his now with older horses, what he does, how he brings them along, and I was afraid of that. I was like, if he'll probably come back and run his race. Now, I got to say this too. Let's also remember that while Sovereignty probably had things, he was running uphill, I think Magnitude was running downhill. And I'm still not 100%. He's a nice horse. Don't get me wrong. He is a nice horse. And I did say, I think he could win the race if he, but I think he had a little assistance. Nobody on the front end to bother him. Willie Dees isn't going to bother that horse.
No, he couldn't hang.
And Barrio probably wasn't at his best, and he doesn't like Churchill, and Sovereignty didn't like the track that day. So what do you get? Wire job. And I was afraid of that. I said, he may just get to the lead, especially with Forge Steele out of the race, who's going to, oh, by the way, it's running at Saratoga this weekend. But he was the confirmed speed. There was no doubt Forge Steele would have been on the lead. Now, that changes the complexion of the race completely. But, yeah, I mean, Now I know, but if a horse comes back from Dubai and Steve Ashton trains him, I don't worry about it. Then the question is, are other factors involved? But I mean, Dick Mandela, the Bill Mott of the West, as I call him, Pleasantly Perfect won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and he came right back and won. It's not that it's impossible; you just have to know how to do it. And, so, long story short, there are some trainers. If the horse ran out in Dubai and he comes back here, probably going to wait one. But there's others that, and the tab will tell you too. And Magnitude's tab was good, was fine. So I had to throw somebody out. That's kind of you can't kiss all the girls, as Gio says, and that was kind of the thing. I said, well, with Forge Steel and some other speed, they soften them up a little bit, and here comes Sovereignty, and that's it. So, but no, it's again, what kind of trainer are you dealing with? That's a big part of it. Let's see. Father Sean says, I won $500 at Antiquarian in that crazy Jockey Club Gold Cup. Yeah, I was there for that. Let's see. Tyler says, who do you guys like for the Breeders' Cup Classic as of right now? Can Magnitude take down Forever Young? Fire away, my boy.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I don't have a crystal ball, and it's just like one thing that we always try to do during Derby season is highlight who the now horses are, but I never have my picks for that race until about the day before, or at least until the Derby post position draw. It's like until that point, how can you pretend to have an idea?
It's fraught with peril to think that way, Tyler. An example of that would be, let me try to think of one. Well, speaking of the now horse, Bernardini, the great dam sire. I remember Bernardini broke my heart because he beat Barbaro when Barbaro broke down in the Preakness. Now, Bernardini, if you watched him all year, Jim Dandy, Travers, I think even the Jockey Club, out front, walking home, never seemed to face anybody. It was just like, God, one perfect trip after another until the Breeders' Cup Classic. And everybody bet Bernardini to win that thing, but not me. Invasor, one of my all-time favorite horses. He won the Uruguayan Triple Crown. They brought him over here, and he finished fourth in his first race and never lost again. And I forget what race it was. He nearly fell on the backstretch, and he got shuffled back all the way to last, and he re-rallied. But that was a classic example of like they will look. People start looking. Oh, he won the Preakness. Well, it's not against older horses, right? So it's Tim's right. You got to pick it, see what you're looking at. You can't bet on Old Glory, and you get killed every time. They gotta justify it. Let's see. Joe Mannix. I have asked Alex, but for Tim, do you feel that Baffert is still feeling the effects of the suspension? I knew somebody was going to ask about this, and I know what Tim's answer is because we talked about it. But go ahead.
Yes. That's all. On the advice of my lawyer, that's all I'll say.
Quote unquote. Tim and I are sitting in Keeneland. I'm going to say because I don't care, but we're sitting in Keeneland, and he comes up. And I forget, he may have had a horse running that day. I can't remember. But and we were talking about it. And, I said, why is he, I don't think his 3-year-olds are any good this year, but he's really struggling and scratching the horses an awful lot, quote unquote, because they're watching. There's some truth to that. I think there is. I like to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. The guy's a great trainer. But does he manipulate on occasion? Probably.
I will say this. Look, I think he's one of the all-time greats who he has people who love him, but he has way too many people that hate him and that talk about every one of his horses in a way that they can't possibly know, and I don't think is true. And I think he gets a bad rap. I'll say that.
I just went back and watched the 2006 Derby today because I was going to do some AI stuff and whatever, and watch Barbaros Derby. Bob Baffert had Point Determined in that race. Now, I watched Point Determined that whole Derby season, and he just never got it. He just never got it. He won it too. He won like the Del Mar Futurity or something at 2 years old, and he just never got it. He had the pedigree. He was by Point Given, and when Point Given was tailor-made for the Triple Crown. How he didn't win it, I'll never know. But he has bad horses. They all do. Steve Asmussen's had, look at this year, he had Chip Honcho. Anything else? Nothing. It happens. They have to prove it on the track. Look at Brandt today. Everybody was all over him at 2. Look what he did. He did, and I'm sitting there watching him and go, I know what's going to happen here. Here comes Brandt, and he's going to flatten right out, and because he's got no heart. Desert Gate, same thing. So all I'm saying is sometimes these guys just have a bad crop. Todd Pletcher's had 5 starters, none of them which are any good in a Derby. Seen that, so you got to take the horse. You can't. It's nice. Bob Baffert knows what to do when he has a good horse. If he doesn't have a good horse, he's like anybody else. He can't perform miracles. But does he occasionally, perhaps?
He just picked up a monster 2-year-old, so let's see what that one does next year.
Oh, the Flightline $10 million horse. Everybody wants to see.
Let's see.
Yeah. Let's see what Laura says. Tim, do you get swayed by others' opinions or a horse that you toss is the favorite? Do you take a second look? Do you watch the paddock?
Okay, so two separate questions here. Let me answer them this way. Swayed by others' opinions. Not really, but I will say this. If other people are talking about a horse and I'm looking at it and I see what they're saying as being a possibility, I may add that. But here's the thing. It's just like I said this word, these words a minute ago, data point. Everything to me in handicapping is a data point. So when somebody else is given their opinion of a horse, I'll take that as another data point. Is that enough to raise a horse up that maybe I included? Yes. Is that going to make me ditch mine? No way. I don't care who it is and how much I respect them and how great a handicapper they are. If I'm against you, and this kind of goes to the other one, a horse I toss is the favorite, I don't care. And if in another way, and this happened yesterday, a horse I didn't like was a big favorite, I don't care. And a horse that I love is actually going up in odds. And people say this, oh, he's cold on the board. I'm like, yes, I'm getting more value on a horse I love. That will never, I hate that term, cold on the board.
That's the greatest feeling in the world.
It is.
He's going up.
When a horse, I love a horse and he's going up in odds, I'm like, I'll take it. To me, that's the definition of finding value.
Yeah, I mean that's the best case scenario. More often than not, though, I know if you have a 15 or 20 to 1 and you see him get bet down to like 16 to 1, that makes me feel good. Is that I must be onto something because you get bet down a little bit, but the ideal is with Rich Strike. There you go. Nobody was on him, and he. The great, but the hardest thing when you start, Laura, is there's a lot of when I used to go to Newport Grand to bet the races, I've told you guys, with all the old hard boot, all the handicappers, and I told you the worst thing of all is the stinking thinking that a lot of people develop over the years, because it really will cloud your judgment on how you'll miss things, because you'll presume that, Bobby Frankel's in the race. He's going to go to the medicine cabinet. There's no way I can win this, and if you fall prey to that, your opinions will get swayed. And you'll think to yourself, well, why do I like this 20 to 1 shot and all these guys don't like him? Well, maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe you're right. It happens. I have had that. I have been sitting in a room with 50 people who were all on a favorite, and I tossed them and I beat them with a 20-1 shot. Now they all hated me, but hey, I won. I mean, it happens. It's the hardest thing to get past. But when you get to a point, I told this story. I remember sweating the Derby every night the night before. Am I if I got the right horse? I don't know. And then Barbaro hit. And I just was locked certain that he was going to win the race. Lawyer Ron, everybody was talking about. I was like, Barbaro's going to win this race. And I never worried about it after that because I was like, he's going to win, and he did. You'll have that moment. Tim's probably had one like that.
Mm. And just to Laura's last question there really quickly, do I watch the paddock? Absolutely. Alex knows this because when we were there together at Keeneland, I never buy a ticket with a seat unless I need it to be able to move around, because sometimes you don't have access to move around if you don't have one, but I never sat in it. And I typically go from the paddock to the betting windows out to watch the race, to the paddock to the betting windows out to watch the race.
He's got a great route. I was pissed at myself. I even bought seats because I never sat in them. I had like these cherries.
And I showed you the best place to watch the races in Keeneland.
Oh yeah, and you don't need if you go there, don't buy a seat. You don't need it.
No.
It was phenomenal.
And
and there's no bad. And that's the other thing. That's why it's such a great track. There's no bad seat. But yeah, the paddock. I have had my mind changed in the paddock quite a few times. Ottoman Fleet is a horse I remember from a couple of years ago.
I don't know about change my mind as much as, again, that supplemental information to where maybe a horse I like second. And here's a really good example. I don't remember the race and I can't think of the horse's name off the top of my head, but that second weekend at Keeneland, we were at the paddock, and one of the horses that was running that day, he was coming from New York. I can't remember who he was, but anyway, he was not the favorite, and he looked like $1 million, and I couldn't get over. And I was even talking to Matt and Sean and everybody, and I was like, oh my God, this horse, I can't get over how he romped on the track. And it was just like, he was a horse that I loved, and I just moved him up in my standings, and it was just like, he absolutely romped that day. Name evades me.
No, here's one that I knew somebody was going to ask. Everybody likes to know what your biggest score was. Tim, what is the biggest long shot you've ever hit on? One that you were convinced on? Well, I know I can tell you right now, Tim wouldn't bet a long shot unless he was lock solid on it. I can tell you that right now.
It's I don't know. I don't keep tracking that way, as far as the odds of a horse or one that I will tell you, like Magnitude and the Risen Star, he was like 44-1 that day. And, I was all over that horse, but I don't look as much unless I was just like hammering a horse to win, which I didn't used to do as much as I'm doing now. And I can talk about that if anybody wants, but basically I used to play so many exactas and tries, and that would be, and it was like I was saying, turning those into big bets. And I've done that quite a few times to where you get a big horse finishing underneath of obvious horses that make a lot of sense, the logicals, and adding those horses in. But, they're always the ones you just add in that you think have a chance underneath. And that's what they typically do. So to me, those big prices, that's where they provide the most value for me. And then the ways that I've always won is underneath in verticals for those big odds coming underneath. And you have a big exacta or try as a result of that.
That's and I wasn't surprised you said that at all, because it's if you're playing exactas, and you score big on an exacta, you almost forget what the odds are. You're just happy you won,
right?
And it's more, if you bet a horse to win and you score, then you're gonna save that result ticket and you're gonna know. But when you play vertical wagers, you might remember that, like, I had in second place, I had a 36-1 shot, and that's what
exactly. Couldn't even tell you his name, but I know I had a 36-1 shot underneath.
I hit the Derby. I hit the Derby in 2013, the Superfecta when Orb won it, and I had Golden Soul in second at 38-1. I don't know what Orb's odds were. I don't know what Revolutionary War's odds were, or Normandy Invasion. Couldn't tell you, but I do remember Golden Soul at 38-1, and I only got that because Mike Welsh said pay attention to him. He said he's training great. Thank you, Mike Welsh. That was a sweet score, but yeah, I mean sometimes it's just you're so happy you just won. Hey, listen, I mean, I had the last exact at Aqueduct today, and I played it. The only reason because it was the last race ever, and it's been documented. I hate that track. I did not like it. It turned into an absolute dump. I will swing the wrecking ball myself, and how bad that track turned into. But a lot of great races out of there. But I had 8-1 on Assume Nothing, I think his name was. And for what's his name? Jamie Ness. And it was and he wired the field. It was a lousy race, but I'll remember that. But the exacta was more what I was happy to get.
Look at our friend David Barista joining us.
David's back. He comes in every once in a while.
If you don't see back there's a couple of David Barista trading cards back on there.
I know you remember how much you cashed your biggest tickets for. Always remember what the cash was. That's the more important number. I had a Claiming Crown. I told these guys a pick 5 Claiming Crown at Churchill, a $16 ticket, and I won $15,000. I'll never forget that. That was and I won 10 in the Claiming Crown this year. Don't ask me why, but I will say this. The linchpin to both was I was supremely confident I could do it. And I don't know, I can't even explain why. When I hit that ticket, I kept saying to myself, make it count. Make it count, make it count. And I only used 2 horses, except the last race is singled. Crazy stuff. It could have very well backfired, but it didn't, but
yeah, but to me the most the most disappointing thing about horse racing right now is that all of those big tickets that you used to see in the past are disappearing. And to me, that is one of the hardest things about the game today. It is that with the calls and them being in the pools and the amount of money and all the computer aided wagering teams and the access they have to the pools that the basic bettor doesn't have, and the ability to wager last minute and having information that we don't have, by the way, which if you don't know, they do. For example, let me tell you this. You can go into any advanced wagering and you can go into the daily doubles and you can see the probables. And you can see how much the daily double is paying with each horse. Well, the calls have access to see pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, and pick 6. Not only what it pays, they know exactly the dollar figure that's on every horse so that they can uncover horses, and the horses that are covered the least with have that statistical probability to win the race better than some of the other long shots that aren't covered well. That's what enables them to hit those races like that. But that's what also is keeping them from paying the way that they used to pay in the past. So,
yeah. And, I'll be very honest in that I don't pay attention to that stuff. And I'll tell you why, because it's a rabbit hole. It's like I was telling you about the old guys who are just so negative. That's like you've lost before you even start because you don't believe you can win. And so I think it's certainly an issue. It's a very big issue. It's a huge issue, and it needs to be resolved without a doubt. But I will say this, and that I do always point to this. You can still beat them. It can be done, and it's not easy. But the way I look at it, hey, if I still get a 30-1 shot home, I won. I beat him, and I can do that. Now, he wants to spend a lot of money, and they probably will Dutch it or leverage it accordingly and still come out okay. But if I get odds, that's a win for me. That's the way I look at it. And I will grant you, it's a little rose-colored glasses. It's a little naive, but that's the way I justify it. to me. They're going to make their money. There's no doubt they're going to make their money. What I would say is they almost ought to be a requirement for those guys. If you're going to raid our pools, then here's our requirement. You got to give 5% of your winnings to California and keep doing it. Give them some money. We got to save California's in bad shape. I'm really that if I had to say one thing that I'm very, very worried about, that's what I'm worried about more than anything, is we can't lose Santa Anita. We can't lose Del Mar. Already lost Golden Gate. They don't even race in the north. I think they race at Pleasanton or the fairground, some kind of fairgrounds up there. That's the one that bothers me because that's just such a majestic thing. And, California racing is great. I love California racing, but that to me is like people losing jobs. If I make a little less money on a recreational activity as opposed to somebody losing their job, I'm more concerned about that. I'm more concerned about them just caving in finally and giving us a national body that governs everything. It's going to be very difficult to get 50 states to now you got to remember, it's not just CAWs. They got to agree on medications, shipping. That's the biggest problem. A lot of people think, like Todd Pletcher got nailed for that thing with Forte and the Hopeful. Graham Motion said one of the biggest problems is shipping from state to state because the rules are different, and a lot of times
rules change every time.
You're doing everything the right way in your state, but the window of time hasn't been sufficient for the medication to get out of his system that's perfectly permissible in, let's say, Virginia, and then you go to New York. So a lot of this is, people, as soon as a trainer gets it, Bill Mott just got zapped for Stars and Stripes, right? Or there's some issue with that. Well, a lot of it is circumstantial. It's not necessarily they're all corrupt. And again, it's stinking thinking. If you get into that rabbit hole, it is very difficult to get out. But you can be pissed off about CAWs. I am. I mean, I know, but just in terms of the betting stuff, it's very easy to fall into that and like saying, "Oh, the Ortiz brothers, they're conspiring in every race." And come on, no way. No, I don't believe it. I just don't. I mean, Tim, I don't know what your perspective is on that, but I don't.
No, I don't believe that definitely happens. But at the same time, you have to wonder as to why there aren't rules about. You hate to see it, but as good as they both are, about brothers being able to ride in the same races like that, because it gives that impression. And one of the biggest problems with the game is the impression with the public, and to be able to grow the game like is needed, you've got to improve that perception a little bit, I think, because it has gotten bad with the look at some tracks.
Yeah, but I would only counter that Willie Shoemaker and Lafitte Pinkai were the best of friends, and yet they wanted to beat each other's brains out every single race. Angel Cordero and Lafitte Pinkai. And Angel Cordero, I heard him even say, he goes, "Oh, I used to try to keep Lafitte Pinkai out late at night because I knew the next day I'd have heat. I never could. He would 11 o'clock. I'm going home, But I think." A friend of mine's father used to say about jockeys, they fight like dogs in the clubhouse. And so I think there's a will to win there that supersedes. I just couldn't say. It wouldn't make any sense. Why would you? If you ever get caught, what happens? You throw it all away. You guys are making seven figures a year. In a good year, you're probably making 8. I can't. I just don't want to get into that. But Debbie, yes, so COW is going away? Probably not. How they're regulated.
I don't see them ever going away, but it has to be more closely regulated and the rules have to change.
I mean, they try. I mean, Oakland doesn't have CAWs at all, from what I understand. They don't have them at all.
I don't think that there's a place that they're not in the pools to some extent.
Yeah, you're probably right. My understanding was that and again, this is I probably shouldn't have said it because I heard it, but my understanding was they do not allow them at all. Now, they can, let's face it, trainers have dummies they bet through, straw men, Jockeys do too. They're not supposed to bet, but they do. Hey, there's a great angle. A lot of times when you see a horse that doesn't make any sense to you at all, and on the morning line he's 20-1, and all of a sudden he's 5-2, that's backstretch money. That's where it's coming because they all know. But they're not going away. I know what Mike Rapoli's trying to do, and he's just saying, I could be nice about this, but would I get anywhere if I was diplomatic? No, I'm going to be brash. I'm going to point these things out until they cave in and they finally have to address them. Part of me kind of likes that, but I also say that they're so provincial that they won't listen to a guy like that. They should. He's got a lot of great ideas. He's got a lot of great. All his ideas are based on one thing, and it makes perfect sense. If you win a race as an owner, you give 5% to thoroughbred aftercare. And he's like, if you're going to quibble about 5%, you shouldn't own horses. So everything is like based upon like every time you win, we donate a percentage, or a percentage automatically goes to the jockey funds, to thoroughbred aftercare. Makes perfect sense. And, but hopefully I don't know how you feel about it, Tim, but
yeah, he's definitely had a lot of good ideas. He's a polarizing figure, but I agree with a lot of what he says, to be completely honest. But the big thing, and David said it there, and we talked about it. If you're going to improve the perception, a lot of the things that he talks about, like the things that are going on with the Jockey Club and some of the things you mentioned about the state racing associations and how the racing differs from state to state, they really need to look at that, because you talked about California having issues. I can see a day, I've been saying this for a couple of years, I can see a day in the not too distant future to where there aren't that many racetracks. There's a Kentucky circuit and, maybe a track or two in Naira and, one in Florida. And if we're lucky, one in California, but that's not a given. And whether or not there's even racing in Louisiana or Texas, or it's just like, it's so up in the air, and the game is really facing a lot of challenges right now. And something has to give at some point, because there are way too many people who are big money wagers. I'm talking about way more than I've ever wagered in my life. They wager in a year. And some of these guys are moving away from the game, and you can look at them, and many of them are moving away from the game. And it's a shame. This game needs to change some things. And they just too many old guys that have been around far too long that are stuck in their ways and need to go.
Well, the other thing is the rebates that I get, you get, but these CAWs, the rebates they get are astronomical compared to what we get. And if they just said, instead of giving you a rebate, we take that money and donate it to thoroughbred aftercare or whatever. I don't know. Something to that effect. It makes no. Somebody put it to me this way, and I never thought of this, but. Back in the day, baseball, boxing, and thoroughbred racing were the three sports. That's all there was. But as soon as they started coming up with lotteries, that's when horse racing started having a problem. Because people used to go to the track to try to improve their situation.
Yeah.
And once they could do it with a lot. Now, here's the thing that doesn't make any sense. I'll give you an example. At a company I work for, I used to do a Derby Superfecta pool every year. I'll handicap the races, $10 a share. We take all that money, we buy as many tickets as we can. I don't know about horse racing. Do you play the Powerball? Well, play the Powerball every week. How much do you spend? $20. So you spend $20 on Powerball tickets when the odds of you winning are in the billions. I give you a proposition for half of that, $10 for one share. And what are your odds? You're in the hundreds. Many tickets we can buy. People couldn't put it together. They'd rather go spend a shitload of money. I was like, and what's more, if you learn how to handicap, you can improve your chances of winning.
Yeah.
But that's what it used to be. And they, all the things you've ever heard about baseball, about they objected to radio, they objected to TV. Nobody will go to the track. Nobody will go to the park. They learned, hey, all those areas, Pink Knuckle, Arkansas, wherever, you develop Cardinal fans because they can listen to the games. Horse racing had a chance to have TV every week. They had it for a little while in the 50s. There's a famous television telecast of Native Dancer, and he was all white. But they never built on it because they said nobody will go to the track. Backwards ass thinking. And they've never gotten past that. The Jockey Club still is thinking of this in terms of old money. We don't need the money. We just run the horses so we can get them to the shed, and
old thinking.
Yeah, it's like that. Now, how do you? I'll ask a question to you, Tim, because we haven't talked about this. One of the things that I have heard probably since I started handicapping is how brittle the horses are now. And over time, I used to start saying, I would say, well, they only run once a month. The big ones do. The claimers still run every 2 weeks, but maybe there's some truth to that. But you know what I think? And I've heard these guys I've told, they go, I think it's the trainers. I think they're afraid to run their horses because of the numbers are going to get affected, because they're getting so much pressure from these new owners to win at, and I think honestly, you see something like the Steve, how many of these big stakes races have we seen? All right, we got a field of 7 that's halfway decent, and all of a sudden the couple scratch out. And the Derby, how many horses scratched out of the Derby for like 3 years in a row now, right? We've had the 21 and 22 and 23. I think it's the pressure on the trainers are afraid to compromise their numbers. That's the biggest part of it. How do you feel?
I mean, I think the biggest part of it is that we no longer race to win races. We race to win in the breeding shed, right? So the biggest horses in the game no longer want to race beyond the point that their stud value is affected. So more than winning for their own record, they want to not race a horse, not to affect their record, in my opinion, but to affect their horse's value in the breeder shed.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, ever since Secretary retired,
but as a result of that, my point is, as a result of that, we're weakening the gene pool, and I think that there are a lot of horses that are being bred to that. Just look, yes, Flightline was a freak. How good is he? For people to even put him in the same sentence as Secretariat, I think is horse racing blasphemy. And it's just like, we'll never know, because he didn't race enough for me. And so many horses that have come back in that, they get injured and they go to the breeding shed. And it's just like, wait a minute, this horse got injured as a 4-year-old. The sire got injured as a 4-year-old. It's just like, we're breeding that into horses and they're so frail. And then not only that, but we've taken away the amount of drugs that we can give the horses on the track, and we've affected that at so many places. And I'm not saying that drugs is the answer, but there are things like racing with Lasix and some things that I think helped horses in the past be able to race more frequently. And maybe people will say that's not a good thing now because they're frail, and I won't argue that. But again, it all starts with the breeding, but then there are other things there that I think impact that with the way that the industry is today. And plus, if there's one thing about the trainers, I'll say this: the way that many trainers train the horses, and here's the best example: the Ocala sales for 2-year-olds. The way they go down there and those race those 2-year-olds and gallop them out, or should I say sprint them for those fast times to be able, they're breaking the horses down. That is not the way we used to train. We used to train horses the opposite: nice and slow in the beginning until they can grow into their body. These horses don't even have an adult body. And it's just like, what do they tell you if you get a dog? Don't let your dog run hard, for the first 1.5 years, because his bones are still developing. Your dog shouldn't run with you like that.
To that end, I've talked to these guys, especially the people who are newer to it. A lot of our older folks remember this. a great example of what you're talking about is this weekend at Saratoga. They're going to run the Suburban Stakes. You know what it used to be called? The Suburban Handicap,
Right.
when there actually was a handicap division. Now, and I'll repeat this but exactly what Tim's talking about. 2-year-old, you brought him along. The end of the year, you got maybe a 1-turn mile race like the Champagne Stakes, maybe 2, maybe the Remsen. You're really ambitious, but generally what you were doing was building foundation steadily, slowly. Most of the time, if a horse would have 3 Derby preps before he ran. And from the Derby on, you kept building foundation. But the thing is, when you went to the 4-year-old season, now you had to carry weight. And that was the determinant for who could be a stallion. Because if you could carry weight and still win, that meant you were sturdy, durable, and you could be a stallion. Scat Daddy is a great example. He didn't run after the 2007 Derby, never ran again. Now, that horse would have been a very good turf miler. And I knew he was going to be a good turf sire because he was by Johannesburg. But, and I told these guys all the time, he reached the height of his value. They knew he wasn't going to be a classic distance horse. He won he beat inferior competition in the Fountain of Youth and the Florida Derby, but he reached the height of his value. Finished 10th in the Derby, we can make an excuse there. So, but the whole thing was Seattle Slew raced at 4. He and Affirmed ran against each other, 2 Triple Crown winners. That's never going to happen again.
Exactly.
But what I wanted to pose to you, Tim, is I'm wondering if this might be a watershed year because we had so many horses with no foundation running in the Derby. Emerging Martin, Chief Wallaby. Golden Tempo had 5 starts, but a lot of these, Commandment had 5. The horse who had the most was Pavlovian. He had 10 going in. A lot of these horses, back in the old days, a lot of these horses would have 7 Derby preps at 3 before they ran. So I'm wondering if maybe this year is like, hey, listen, we can't.
Yeah, and that kind of goes to Tyler's question right there, Alex, about the best 3-year-old. And what I would say is this, and it was the exact point that I was going to make. It's funny you mentioned that I think Golden Tempo has definitely proven himself. I was a little I thought it was questionable myself and questioned him and his ability after the Kentucky Derby, but excuse me, he proved to me in the winning the Belmont that he's for real and he's a real horse. But that being said, I think he's the best horse in a weak crop, maybe the weakest crop we've seen in some time. And when you look at that field, and I'm going to give you a horse as an example, Emerging Market to be in the Derby with, as like the 3rd start. And it's just like, that was unheard of in the past. And to go in there and you hear people talking about it being the new norm. No, it shouldn't be, because all we're doing is that is definitely affecting the game to where, because these horses are being brought along so quickly and pushed right into races like the Derby, they're not being allowed to develop properly. And it's affecting the game overall, because if you look at the greatest sires in the history, you go back and you start looking at, they're not all Triple Crown winners and they're not all huge, but they are horses who typically had good 4-year years, 5-year-old years, and who at least race a couple of years beyond, the classics years, the Triple Crown years, and being able to sustain performance and being able to grow and develop. Emerging Market looked like a horse with a lot of promise, but you have to ask yourself, after the last couple of races, have they broken this horse who had a lot of promise, who will now never live up to what he could have been?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, I would hope. Now, this goes back to a national body, because if they had now, every state has its own breeding program. Virtually every state, they all have the Pennsylvania, New York, California, the big one. But you can even go to like Minnesota, Iowa. They've all got breeding programs. If you have a national body that says you can't race in the Derby unless you have 3 preps, Think about what that would do. Think about how many more good prep races we would see, not just a couple good Derby prospects and then maybe 4 claimers. Think about that. Look at that Florida Derby this year. That was going to be 8. That was an anomaly, wasn't it? To have May or Puma, Commandment, Chief Wallaby. It was a total anomaly. Yeah. Nearly.
Yeah, it really
was. Now, there's another one.
I mean, it was a very strong prep race, but it really didn't forecast anything. It just, a group of horses who had, once again, here's that word, that P word, they have potential, but they had it. The way the industry has gone lately, we're pursuing the wrong things.
I agree, and that if they could revert back to some semblance of the old way they did it. First of all, if they upped the Breeders' Cup Juvenile purse to like $5 million, you'd be having plenty of people running their 2-year-olds. They're promising ones instead of waiting till 3. Just an idea, but the 2-year-old year, Tim will tell you, back in the day, it used to be fun because you could watch a Breeders' Cup Juvenile with maybe 6 or 7 horses that were going to run in the Derby. And you could follow a chart their progress. And the best angle of all was when you had horses like Storm the Court, who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I threw him out. I knew he'd never win the Derby. They caught him on a good day, and the field was a little light, But the 2-year-old race, I mean, I used to love Belmont Championship Weekend, when you had the Champagne Stakes, and I think you had the Frisette, and you could watch, a really high-powered group of 2-year-olds that you knew most of them were going to be on the Derby trail. Not now. Ted Noffey, I was not a fan of, because I was like, he's not going to win the Derby. Can't get the distance. Don't believe it. Classy horse, Pat Day Mile horse, in my opinion. But right now, like the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, when was the last Breeders' Cup Juvenile that had any bearing on the Derby? And they don't get any points for it. So the trainers are like, why even run? I might as well wait until the Risen Star where I get 50 points. And then I'm in. So they got to reconfigure it somehow. But Tim is exactly right. Is that you need if they can revert back to that. If they could, it's been nice the last couple of years. We've had good 4-year-olds. We've had Sierra Leone, Fierceness. We've had some good ones, but we need to get the emphasis, way too much emphasis on the Triple Crown.
All right, Alex, we've been going for about 2.5 hours, but how about we answer this question and kind of sum things up a little bit, if you'd like.
Well, let me see. Let's get one more in here if we could. Okay, I think we talked about the point system. Yeah, I said I'm going to let you go. You've been here, guys. I hope you got something out of this. Tim was very gracious in coming aboard. This was great for me, Tim. I don't get to talk horse racing with my colleagues, my buddies, and we'll definitely be betting again at Keeneland. I know that. We're going to get you up to the spa.
Yeah, we'll work on it. Let me say this to everybody out there. I know you got a lot of people in here that were talking about just learning and everything and learning from you. And I think that's awesome. One of the things that Sean and I used to do on Trust the Prophets was we were always saying that we were, we love talking horses, and anything that you can, garner from what we were saying was just that's as much enjoyment in doing this for me as giving anybody a winner. And one thing that I always say about handicapping is that I never tell anybody what to bet. I will tell you what I'm betting the way I see the race. And the thing is, once again, data points. You can take that and say, I'm crazy and you're going to go another direction. And I respect that. But I just don't get the people in this game, especially on Horse Racing X, that love to call people names and tell them they're idiots because they have an opinion. This is a pari-mutuel game to where the losers pay the winners. We're betting against each other. We're not betting against the trucks. And it just happens that one of the others is the cause. But here's the thing I will tell all of you. Just about everybody out there, if you follow this game enough, You have enough handicapping ability to be able to identify good horses and pick winners. The problem is not in picking winners. It's in learning how to bet and getting some structure and discipline to be able to approach this game, to be able to win money, not win races, and learning how to understand odds, find value, construct your tickets, and when and where to pass is an important part of this game, and is one of the most important parts, even more so than learning how to read a form and to identify those horses. That's the easy part. So try to give yourself that challenge. Go through a card, try to identify your strongest opinions, where you think that the horses stand out the most, and only bet those races, and you'll find your success going up, which increases your ability to play the game more. And the more you learn and play, the more you learn and play. And I'm still learning today.
Yep, we all keep learning, and the way the technology is going, we sort of have to. And it's funny listening to old school guys who still, they like, I always say the racing form was designed for people who go to the track, as opposed to Brisnet or others might be for more analytical. I don't know, but yeah, that sums it up. Discretion's a better part of value, and valor rather. And but yeah, I mean, like I said, I really hope you guys got something out of this, because I did. And then Tim taught me a couple of things. He's taught me many things, but this was Tim again. Thank you so much. And if you don't mind, I'd like to have you come back sometime.
Absolutely.
And maybe we get around the Breeders' Cup, or perhaps maybe we can do have a kind of a regular Derby thing, or I think that would be a lot of fun, because I have my way of doing it. But Tim's, as you can tell, it is a little different in some respects. And when we share the same brain on some races, we usually cash pretty well. So. But anyway, I'll let you go. Thanks again so much, and we'll talk soon for sure.
Might see you at the spa.
All right. Well, you let me know, because I definitely owe you. After you gave me the recommendation at Tony's, that was the best filet mignon I've ever had, and it was great. So I got some places up there. I'll take it for sure. But all right, be well, my friend.
So, sounds good. We'll see you.
Thanks. Okay, guys. I thought that was great. And again, I hope you guys got something out of it. Heard a little different perspective on things, and that's sort of the idea. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sean. Give me a shot. But I thought that was great. And Laura and Tyler, I did see that little banter you had about assigning you for pace numbers for the Breeders' Cup. We could do that. We could do something fun like that, and we'll get Scott involved in that. But the whole idea is just to educate. We all talk to each other. We all get something out of it. So I'm glad to know you guys enjoyed it. Already got the Saratoga PPs. So I've already taken a real cursory look at them, and we got 3 stakes races on Saturday. Now, I will have, for Saratoga, I do this. And one of these days when I have more time, I'll try to broaden it a little bit. But we will have the full race cards available on the website at rightatthewire.com. And usually just for Saturday, or Saturday and Sunday, or depending. But they'll be available to you. And it'll have best bets, long shot plays. And we'll do some stuff aside from... Oh, okay. Debbie's in too. So there'll be some extra stuff available that I'm not going to put on YouTube, and that'll just be for people who purchase the race card. So that's available to you. Let's see what Tyler has to say here. Tyler's had a lot to talk about tonight. Have you seen the rough field for the Haskell? Now that is going to be a fun race. The Puma is back. Oh, that'd be fun. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know. That'd be great to see the Puma again at 1 1/8. I think he could be very dangerous. Not sure about 1 1/4 with him, but 1 1/8, yeah. I haven't seen it yet. I was going to go, but I am not this year. I have another commitment with family, so I won't be going to the Haskell. But I am going to be at Saratoga this weekend for the 4th of July, and I am going to, Tyler is the other Medina spirit. I don't know what that means, David. I like the group plan. Okay. So anyway, plenty out there. And, again, always want to thank you guys. Thanks for being so respectful and so nice to Tim. Tim's a great guy. And like I said, if you're ever down in Keeneland, he's not hard to find. And, I was just really, really pleased that he was kind enough to give us the time. But anyway, I'm going to call it here. And again, thanks all of you for coming. I'm a little tired. Life does get in the way, but that's it from here. I'll talk to you soon. And until then, be well.